Chapter 368. Feng Bujue did not mind the change around him. He continued to talk to himself. When you announced that you voted for Billy and Aldan not guilty, from how I see it, you have already made your stance clear. He scoffed. Those two were given the crime of spreading chaos, and it was not unjust at all. If they were found not guilty, then that would be strange. He shrugged. Billy likes to lock people up and play a game, and Aldan likes to kill you if you don't tell me a ghost story. As for Rabbit and Bugs Bunny, haha. The prophet still did not answer, but the Lego blocks around them shook even more violently. Feng Bujue speculated. From how I see it, that day in court, other than the two bunnies, you were not idle either, right? As Rabbit's old friend, you are obviously on his side. Your attitude toward the side of chaos is the same. So, he swung his arm and pointed at the rhombus. There is only one truth. You suddenly said a famous line without any sense of awkwardness. Xiao Tan's lips twitched as he commented. Brother Ju continued from where he left off. You are the same as Ravid. You are detained for contempt of court, right? Humph. But the way you are detained is different from him. Rabbit, Billy, and Aldan are locked up in the prison created by the Time Master, and you are locked up here. Just as he finished, the Lego blocks on the walls and floor suddenly stopped moving. The rhombus suddenly collapsed, and the Lego blocks fell to the ground. A giant, Brother Ju and Xiao Tan, who were the size of toys, head appeared from within. Obviously, this was the prophet's head. There was no projection, his actual body was in this space. Wow! Xiao Tan gasped when he saw the prophet's face. So, you are a Wookiee, a fictional race from Star Wars, covered in long hair, mostly brown, and with a face like a long-haired Cheshire dog? Judging from the head, the prophet did indeed fit the image of a Wookiee, but he replied in a rather unhappy tone, No. Indeed, you don't think or act like a Wookiee. Feng Bujue said, but after seeing your real face, I can't help but ask, is there really a person in your so-called 12-member jury? His question was not without reason. 4 of the 3 members of the jury he knew, none was human. Humph! The prophet's floating head sneered. How many races do you think exist in the multiverse? You humans are only a small part of it. Alright, let's put that question aside for now. Since you've given up on your disguise, let's be frank, Feng Bujue said. As matters stood, the prophet could not be bothered to continue to conceal the truth. After all, there was no harm in revealing the truth to begin with. Since you insist on getting to the bottom of this, you must be mentally prepared for the truth. Don't worry, my mental endurance is beyond your imagination, Feng Bujue replied. The prophet was silent for a few seconds, sighed, and said, I am both a prisoner here and a guard here. Then, the adjustment of the prisoner's consciousness was also done by you? Feng Bujue asked. That's right, the prophet replied. Not only that, but it was also me who turned them into toys. He paused for a moment. The night security guards are just a few puppets with no consciousness, and they were also created and controlled by me. Why did you do all this? Xiao Tan asked. Let me tell you a story. The prophet let out a long sigh as if he was adjusting his emotions. Once upon a time there was a prison. This prison looked like a large supermarket. There were all kinds of goods inside, or rather, resources, which included food, clothes, fuel, luxury goods, tools, weapons, and so on. This prison held thousands of prisoners, men, women, old and young. They were all human prisoners from the 42 main universes. Every day, everything in this prison would be reset. The things that were broken would be restored, the shelves that were emptied would be filled, the blood stains on the ground would disappear, and so would the corpses of the dead. Only the things that recorded the date would be changed. For example, the wall calendar would automatically be delayed by 1 day every day. The production date on all the food packaging would also be delayed by 1 day. The doors and windows of the supermarket could be opened freely, But the city outside the supermarket was just an illusion. If the prisoners walked out of this building, they would fall into the endless void and die. Of course, staying in this prison was not a problem for them. No one would starve, and there were even many entertainment facilities for them. After all, the resources were inexhaustible. At least, that was what people thought in the first few days. However, a problem soon appeared. Every day after the reset, new prisoners would appear, and they would be randomly placed in various parts of the supermarket. The smallest number would be a few, while the largest number would be dozens. Just like that, a week passed. As the population increased, the conflicts between the prisoners became more frequent. Initially, it was a small number of strong and aggressive prisoners who competed with each other for entertainment facilities, luxury goods, expensive food, beautiful women, and so on. During that period, the basic survival needs of the prisoners were not threatened. There was plenty of food and drinking water, so most of them were more obedient. After a few weeks, the population continued to increase unknowingly. It was not until a month later that there were long lines in front of the few toilets. 2 months later, 1/3 of the supermarket was filled with the stench of excrement, and in the remaining 2/3, people crowded together to eat. On the 10th day of the 3rd month, the prisoners who had formed gangs and occupied the food, women, and entertainment areas were massacred by the other prisoners. The latter had reached the point where they could only eat 1 meal a day and had no privacy when they excreted. After that incident, the problem of resources was slightly alleviated, but the fear remained in people's hearts. Thus, an institution similar to a government was born. They established a set of rules, stipulated that food should be rationally distributed, luxury goods should be used in rotation for a limited time, robbery, murder, rape, and other violations should be punished, and they even established a population registration system. This is probably the most ironic thing I have ever heard. Fong Bujua heard this and continued, a group of prisoners trying to implement laws and regulations in a prison. This is the contradiction of human nature. Xiao Tan said thoughtfully, when living in a civilized society, people yearn for freedom and indulgence. But under the law of the jungle, people also yearn for safety and order. The prophet sighed again and then continued to narrate, however, politics is a dirty thing after all. To implement a system, there must be executors. Those supervisors put in the work, so naturally they would want more resources. The problem of the increasing number of prisoners was not fundamentally solved. Therefore, after a period of time, to be exact, 2 months and 3 days after the first massacre, the resources were once again in a serious crisis. At that time, people discovered that the management organization had become another hegemonic group that oppressed the other prisoners, no different from the initial group of bullies that were massacred. Unsurprisingly, the second large-scale massacre broke out. After the bloody storm, the survivors finally realized that there was only one way to maintain peace, and that was to maintain the number of prisoners in the prison at a safe level forever. Thus, hundreds of survivors reached an agreement: kill every new batch of prisoners that came in from that day onwards. These days lasted for a long time. During that period, after the reset at midnight every day, the first thing the old prisoners had to do was to find the new prisoners that appeared in the supermarket and kill them all. Then, they could have a peaceful day. But the number of new prisoners thrown in every day was not fixed, and after a long time, there would always be fish that escaped the net. There were also people who, out of selfishness, secretly kept and hid some beautiful women, and forced them to be slaves on the condition that they were not killed. In short, after a period of accumulation, the conflict finally broke out. After that, there was a new structure. The prisoners were divided into several different forces, each occupying an area. Each faction had their own way of doing things, their own principles and positions. They fought with each other for resources. Although there were casualties, they could be replenished by the new prisoners. Huh! Xiao Tan was enlightened. Isn't this the same as the current situation? Yes, it's almost the same, the prophet continued. But it's not the same. He looked down at the two players. If you were in my position, would you be willing to see a group of humans putting on all kinds of dirty shows in front of you every day, deceiving each other, blood and flesh flying, or would you be more willing to see a group of toys fighting a bloodless war? So, you used your ability to change this prison. Feng Bujue continued. Yes, after adjusting their consciousness, these prisoners will think that they are like the characters in Toy Story, in a supermarket in the human world. When the business hours are over every day, they will be active and fight for glory. During the day, they will enter a state of unconscious dormancy under my ability, the prophet said. After many experiments and corrections, I have blocked many areas in their mind. At this stage, this operation is almost perfect. The toys will still avoid the security puppets I send, but their awareness of not being discovered by humans is limited to this. The prophet took a deep breath and said, When I was imprisoned in this prison, the crime was not only contempt of court, but more importantly, my inclination toward chaos. In order to punish me, the court of truth specially designed this prison to show me all kinds of evil, endless evil, as a kind of torture. And you humans are the best actors. You are selfish, stubborn, conceited, cunning, fragile, ignorant, rude, hypocritical, dirty, barbaric, jealous, greedy, licentious, irritable, stupid, and unrepentant. But in the end, I found a way to free myself from it by relieving the prisoners of their physical needs. I have effectively maintained the population, and by limiting their hours of activity, I have established a system that will last forever. With the premise of preserving the individuality of the soul, I turned the complicated desire and ugliness in human nature into a pure, but not cruel, will to fight. I have given you humans, this hopeless race, control. At this point, the prophet's emotions became more agitated. Now, do you understand? There is nothing here that you need to end. He said darkly. I did not want to say so much, but now that I have, you should be satisfied, right? Feng Bujue. Brother Ju wiped the sweat from his forehead. Okay, thank you for your hard work. At that moment, the blocks on the ground floated up again and gathered around the prophet's head. They wrapped around him and formed the rhombus that kept changing on the surface. Very well, then. The prophet let out a long sigh and said, 10 minutes ago, before you recklessly exposed my identity as a prisoner and wanted to know the truth, I tried to tell you this. He paused for a moment. Don't get involved in the war. Go find the other 2 travelers from another dimension and get out of here. Chapter 369. Feng Bujue thought about it and replied, Okay, I get it. I can promise you that I will no longer try to interfere with the general trend of this war, but I can't guarantee what the other 2 travelers from the other world will do. He tried to say, If you really want us to leave as soon as possible, what do you want? The prophet interrupted. I want you to lend me your army. Feng Bujue said. The prophet relied on this single word to fully convey his indignation. That is impossible. Feng Bujue added, After all, we only have 2 targets, there is no need to mobilize so many people. It was the same word, but this time, the prophet was conveying, that was more like it. How about this? Feng Bujue added, How about you give us a box of Lego bricks? What are you planning to do? The prophet asked. Of course, I am going to build a vehicle that can help us find and approach our target. Feng Bujue said with a darkened face, Amidst thousands of soldiers, take down the enemy's general, I understand. The prophet interrupted again. I will give this order as the prophet of Lego. You can define this operation as the prophet's official response to the theft of Lego resources from novel. Xiao Tan interrupted, But technically, we are still classics people. Is it okay for us to do this for Lego? After tonight, we will disappear forever. Why are you still thinking about that? Feng Bujue replied on behalf of the prophet. He raised his head to look at the rhombus. Then it's a deal. At 2 a.m. sharp, the 2 night guards left the security room punctually. Just as the prophet said, the guards were merely his puppets. They had no consciousness. At a fixed time, they would come out from the security room, switch on their flashlights, and split into 2 groups to patrol the area. The whole process took exactly 15 minutes. After the patrol, they would return to the security room and lock the door from the inside. During this time, the toys would not come out. They had turned off all the light sources in advance and hid at the bottom of the shelves or in some blind spots, waiting for the patrol to end. However, as players, Passing Rain and Laughing Soul had no such concerns. For them, it was more convenient to move around during this period of time. When the clock struck 2 a.m., they departed from Novel's territory. 2 agile figures leaped forward on top of the shelves, quickly approaching the Lego house. All the hidden sentries around them were rendered useless. They did not have to worry about being ambushed. Classic would not be able to discover their whereabouts and react accordingly. Sigh. In the end, I still gave up on the side quest. Laughing Soul grumbled along the way. But is it really okay to not bring the personal guards? Without the aid of the scenario, we won't be able to defeat the leader, right? Passing Rain was calm. That can't be helped. The other toys will not move during the patrol. If we want to bring the personal guards with us, we have to wait until the patrol ends. Cola House has already taken precautions against Novel, so now is the only chance for us to get close. Cousin, how come I feel like you're purposely trying to lose? Laughing Soul could not help but voice her thoughts. Since this is just a practice match, the result should not matter, right? Passing Rain replied. She turned her head to look at Laughing Soul. Furthermore, with Bujue's cleverness, he should have seen through your original intention and told Xiao Tan about it. Huh? What original intention? I don't understand. Laughing Soul quickly played dumb. Don't worry, since the main purpose of this match is to help Xiao Tan gain more experience in fighting other players, I will not go too far. Passing Rain continued, ignoring Laughing Soul's denial. As a player who specializes in close combat, Xiao Tan's current ability is only slightly above average. If I give it my all, he will be dead within 10 moves. She analyzed confidently. Bujue should know that as well. He will not allow that to happen, so he will focus on me from the start so that I won't be able to focus on him. At the very least, I'm a sniper. I can one-shot people, okay? You're all ignoring me. Laughing Soul replied. Even though your skill and the power of your sniper rifle can affect Artemis's embrace to a certain extent, it is still a perfect equipment that specializes in countering long-ranged attacks, Passing Rain explained. Unless you also have a perfect shooting weapon, even if he stands there for you to aim at, the chance of killing him in one shot is very low. And for someone like Bujue, if you can't kill him in one shot, it will be very hard to find another chance to snipe him. Laughing Soul thought about it for a few seconds. What I mean is, doesn't the leader need to be on guard against me sniping Xiao Tan? He knows you won't snipe Xiao Tan, Passing Rain replied. What do you mean by that? Laughing Soul was strangely angry. I also know you won't snipe Xiao Tan, Passing Rain said. Cousin, you're being a bully. Because this is a practice match, there's no point in killing him in one shot, Passing Rain said. Laughing Soul was startled. Ah yes. Yes. This is to train him. She laughed sinisterly and took advantage of the situation to say, Watch me shoot him full of holes. Achoo! Xiao Tan's sneeze caused his whole body to jump. What's going on? Is Xiao Ling cursing me behind my back again? Not only did she use the tone that she's used to, she even mentioned the person's name. Feng Bujue's criticism was equally sharp. At the time, the two of them were standing in the corner of Lego City, waiting for Musashi to assemble the vehicle. This was the second time Feng Bujue had summoned this guy. The first time was at South Park. Before leaving the sandbox, to not waste the skill's cooldown, Brother Ju had used this summoning skill once and communicated with this summoned character. Musashi's appearance was that of a primary school student from a comic. His head was triangular, his chin was sharp, and his face was long. He wore a pair of glasses that covered half of his face. He wore a yellow short-sleeved t-shirt and purple shorts with 2 red straps. He had a pair of conspicuous red socks on his feet, and there was a green bow tie with many purple polka dots on it. His first appearance in the original work was when the teacher asked him to write his name in kanji. However, he stood up with great vigor and replied, "I, Musashi Kagane, am a strange third grader who can't write more than 6 Chinese characters." But in reality, he was a genius. His answer was so that the teachers and students would look at him with disdain, contempt, coldness, and discrimination. He wanted others to think that he was a weirdo pervert. According to Musashi's research, 99% of the great people in history were seen as weirdos in their childhood and school years. Because Musashi wanted to become a great person, he decided to become a weirdo first. Driven by this kind of crazy logic, Musashi firmly embarked on the path of weirdo. When he walked or stood, his hands would naturally be raised before him in a posture similar to snake fist. When he spoke in a strange tone, and occasionally he would let out a hiss 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 sound. When he succeeded in doing weird things and was watched by others, he would feel very happy. Sometimes his body would spin at high speed like a wheel. In the 6th volume overall, Mr. Akira Toriyama had designed a game that divided the weirdos into 5 stages. They were: Sour Plum Superman stage, use your brave index finger to poke the butt of the person next to you; Forest King Bashan stage, open the window and shout, 3 times. Hobie Iceman stage, jump and shout, shit, shit. Dr. Meister stage, shout, merge, and then get into someone's arms. King Nikoto stage, stuff peanuts in his nose and then spit them out. If he did all 5 of these things, he would be an out-and-out pervert. Based on this standard, Musashi's Kogani had long since lost his mind and was beyond redemption. In short, this was a very annoying summoning character. Its summoning condition, do a strange action, was quite unique. Not to mention, he was almost useless in battle. His combat power was infinitely close to 0. However, he was not completely useless. On the contrary, he might be more useful than any other F-level summoning character. Because Musashi could create things. Of course, his ability to invent and create was far inferior to those god-level figures like Dr. IQ and Three-Eyed Prodigy. However, compared to those scientific and normal virtual characters, the things that Musashi Koganai created were extremely sharp. Ha ha, it's done. After 20 minutes of assembly, Musashi successfully created a weird-looking mech with Lego brick. He announced happily, "This is it. Lego Fugu Gladiator. This is the most disgusting robot I have ever seen." Fong Bujue said, "It's like those creatures that the newbies made when they played Spore." Actually, before you told me that the spine of creatures could be adjusted, I had been making that." Brother Ju's words seemed to evoke some strange memories in Xiao Tan. "Haha. You must think that it's weird for me to make this kind of thing." Hiss. Musashi was so excited that he spun vertically like a snake. "My perverted index has risen again." Hey, that kind of index only exists in your imagination, and it's useless. It was the first time that Xiao Tan had seen this weird kid's behavior. Without a doubt, he was shocked. Unexpectedly, just as Xiao Tan finished speaking, Musashi turned into a white light and disappeared. What happened? Could it be that he knows how to become invisible? Xiao Tan was confused. "It's just that the time is up," Fong Bujue replied and pointed at his knee. Actually, he should have disappeared 4 minutes ago. It must be the special effect of the growth alchemy amplification device that allowed him to exist longer. He touched his chin and said, theoretically, this special effect of slightly increasing the effect of the summoning skill should not only be reflected in the time. Perhaps Musashi's inventive ability or fighting ability has been increased as well, but this kind of increase cannot be directly seen. No, I think the increase in his perverted ability has been directly shown to me, Xiao Tan said. Feng Bujue smiled and said, all right, let's get back to the topic. Even though we now have a robot vehicle similar to Gundam, it is still very difficult to find Passing Rain and Laughing Soul in Novel's camp. So far, we cannot confirm their role and mission in Novel. In fact, we cannot be 100% sure that they are in Novel's camp. So, they're already heading this way. Suddenly, another voice sounded from behind the two of them, joining the conversation. The two players turned around and saw a Lego toy. It was a bald elder in a suit sitting in a wheelchair. Chapter 370. Professor X? Feng Bujue asked. Yes, Professor X replied in his infectious and cordial tone. Hello. Wait a minute. Xiao Tan reacted quickly. He leaned over and whispered into his brother Ju's ear, that's not right. This guy can read other people's minds. What if he read the prophets? Professor, I want to ask, what is your superpower? Feng Bujue ignored Xiao Tan and asked the professor a question he already knew the answer to. Unexpectedly, the Lego Professor X replied, I don't have any superpowers. Xiao Tan was stunned. No way? That's obvious. Feng Bujue turned his head and whispered to his teammate, toys can't have mental abilities like memory reading or mind control. He shrugged. If they do, then it would be meaningless for you to lower your voice because he already knew what you were talking about before you even said it. Oh. Xiao Tan nodded. A few seconds later, he asked, Professor, does that mean you don't have any combat abilities? Haha. Knowledge is power. Even without superpowers, I can still do a lot of things. Professor X smiled. Of course, you can also treat me as an ordinary bald man in a wheelchair. No, I didn't mean that. The kind Xiao Tan quickly waved his hand and denied. Well, very well. Professor X maintained the peaceful smile on his face. Because if you dare to mention the words wheelchair or baldy, I'll have my students pin you to the ground and crush your skull with the wheelchair. Hey. He's completely corrupted. He's obviously very concerned about his lack of superpowers. And he's already said those two words twice, Xiao Tan muttered softly. Feng Bujue stepped forward and changed the topic. Well, Professor, if you can't use telepathy, how did you know they're here? I'm just running an errand for the Prophet. I'm here to pass on a message, Professor X replied. The next second, he suddenly added, What? Are you saying that I don't have legs that can run? Then, he pulled out a pistol from his jacket pocket. Go to hell, you two impolite brats. Then, he jumped up from his wheelchair and started shooting randomly. Brother Ju and Xiao Tan were shocked. They rolled to the sides and fled like rats. Fortunately, this Professor X had poor marksmanship and did not hit the target at all. Moreover, the gun he used and the bullets he fired were all extremely small Lego pieces, which didn't cause much damage to the surroundings. At this moment, there was a whooshing sound. A red shadow instantly appeared and snatched the gun from Professor X's hand. Hey! Stop messing around. Lex_Luthor, Superman's nemesis, one of the classic villains. It's time to take your medicine. As he spoke, the Lego Flash pushed Luthor back into the wheelchair and pressed a button on the back of the wheelchair. A few wooden sticks popped out from both sides of the wheelchair and tied up the crazy Baldy, making him unable to move. Let me go. I'm Professor X. They discriminate against disabled people. Luthor's legs flailed as he struggled. He was pushed away by the Flash. I'm sorry. Another blue shadow appeared beside Feng Bujue and Wang Tanji with the speed of the flash. He was Quicksilver, the son of Magneto and basically Marvel's Flash. Once the medicine stops, he'll show symptoms of schizophrenia. Last week, he was shirtless and painted his body with paint to pretend to be Kratos. In the end, he was slapped into a pancake by the Hulk. Why would they send someone like that to deliver the message? Xiao Tan replied. In any case, according to the information given by the Prophet, there are 2 members from Novel who ignored the security and are approaching the Lego house. They will arrive soon. Quicksilver added, the Prophet's intention is for you to deal with them outside. They've come to us on their own accord. Feng Bujue scoffed. Humph, that's quite brave of them, the guys from the Survey Corps. How many times are you going to use this kind of costume joke? Xiao Tan said weakly. Obviously, in the 2 weeks between the end of Chonglin Sword Festival and I Am a Writer, Feng Bujue often made fun of Passing Rain's costume. Okay, we'll go now, Feng Bujue said as he jumped onto the Lego pufferfish gladiator and opened the cockpit cover. The appearance of the mech was like a pufferfish with long legs. There were 2 parts to the whole machine. One was the body, there was no distinction between the head and the torso, and the other was the 2 legs, tapered legs, they could not be straightened, and the bones were wondrous. Furthermore, the Lego pufferfish gladiator only had legs and no arms. For Musashi's It's Done, it was not because he did not have enough time, but because he did not want the mech to look weird. The cockpit of this thing was similar to a biplane. One at the front and one at the back, it could only seat 2 people. The more confusing thing was, how did this thing fight? And a robot without arms, why would it need 2 pilots? Would each of them control 1 leg? Oh, the control is quite simple. After Feng Bujue jumped into the cockpit, he realized there were only 2 joysticks and a knob-shaped switch. The left side of the knob was off and the right side was on. The 2 joysticks, without a doubt, controlled the movement of the left and right legs. In front of the console, there was a superfluous word written on it, Mobile Control System. Xiao Tan followed suit and jumped into the mech, entering the co-pilot cabin at the back. Unexpectedly, the moment he sat down, he was shocked. Hey! Why are there so many buttons? Hearing this, Feng Bujue felt incredulous. In the cockpit in front of him, there were only 3 parts that could be controlled. Moreover, it felt as though there was no need for a 4th item. What else could there be at the back? Let me see. Feng Bujue climbed out of his cockpit and took 2 steps across the top of the mech. He moved to the back of the fishtail and looked into the co-pilot cabin. If he did not look, he would not have known. Once he looked, he would piss himself. In Xiao Tan's cockpit, there were at least hundreds of buttons in front of him and on both sides. There were also joysticks, knobs, light switches, various instruments, indicator lights and so on. The most outrageous thing was, in a very conspicuous position, there was a button covered by a small glass cover. Next to it was a yellow and black nuclear weapon warning sign. Finally, above the console in front of the co-pilot cabin, there were 4 words written, Weapon System. This is really King crazy. Even Feng Bujue could not help but shout out loud. The movement control system is even simpler than a bumper car, but the weapon system is like the universal continuous enhancement mobile arsenal general_unilateral Neuralink discontinuous autonomous maneuver. I don't know why. I feel like I can destroy the world just by sitting here and rolling my face on the keyboard, said Xiao Tan with narrowed eyes. That's not right. Calm down and think about it. A weapon that only took 20 minutes and less than a box of Lego bricks to make can't be that powerful. Feng Bujue muttered, maybe it looks like there are many buttons, but in fact, most of them are useless devices of little value. For example, a bunch of buttons are all for adjusting the temperature and humidity in the cockpit. Only 1 or 2 of them are real weapons. Haha, you can try it out slowly. said Xiao Tan as he pushed open the co-pilot cabin cover. He stood up, pushed himself up with his arms, and flipped over to the main cockpit in front. I'll control the movement. Feng Bujue did not care. He jumped down from the fishtail and entered the co-pilot cabin full of adjustable parts. Whatever, let's go. Xiao Tan heard this and turned the knob in front of him to the on-side. He then pulled the lever and controlled the pufferfish gladiator to move forward. Hey, it only takes one step at a time. Xiao Tan controlled the robot to move less than 10 steps before he realized this very serious problem. And the speed and frequency of the legs are exactly the same as the speed of my hand pulling the lever. So what? Feng Bujue asked. Using this method of pushing and pulling the lever repeatedly, the energy consumption is about the same as walking on my hands. Xiao Tan replied. Humph. Feng Bujue scoffed and raised his right hand. That's because you're not good enough. If it were me, I could do it with one hand. Hey! Xiao Tan roared, what's the point of showing off such wretched confidence? At the same time, outside the Lego house on top of one of the shelves. In the shadows, a sharp gaze had already pierced through the scope of a sniper rifle and aimed at the only exit of the Lego house. This was a perfect sniping spot. It was high up, there was no wind, and the distance was just right. The exit of the Lego house did not even have a cover. It was completely open. With the help of the night vision goggles, Laughing Soul could observe the situation clearly. Even a fly, of course, to them, a fly was about the size of a mouse, would not be able to fly past. Now, all we need to do is wait. Passing Rain held the night vision goggles and squatted down beside Laughing Soul. The two of them were the sniper and observer, and their teamwork was perfect. Anything that happened outside of Laughing Soul's sight would be handled by Passing Rain. Actually, they might have already left the Lego house and returned to the area occupied by Classic. When Laughing Soul spoke, she maintained her aiming position and did not move an inch. When we received the report from the personal guards, it was at 1:53 a.m., and Bujue and Xiao Tan entered the Lego house at around 1:40 a.m. If they went in to complete the mission or trigger the plot, theoretically speaking, they should not have left so soon. What if they are like us, ignoring the night guard and still dare to move around after 1:55 a.m.? Laughing Soul said, then before we arrive, they will have about 10 minutes to escape. There are two prerequisites to this hypothesis. First, they have completed what they came to do at the Lego house as fast as they could, and second, they still do not wish to fight us, Passing Rain said thoughtfully. With Bujue's style, for the side quest or hidden mission, the leader might temporarily avoid us, Laughing Soul said. Furthermore, this kind of avoidance will not be considered as passive gaming by the system. At most, it will be considered a tactical detour. If they have really returned to Classic's territory, then we will be in a very dangerous situation, Passing Rain said. Laughing Soul sighed. I've thought about it. The patrol ended at 2:15 a.m. From then on, we will wait for another 15 minutes. If no one shows up at 2:30 a.m., or if we are discovered by the hostile toys, we will retreat first. Then, we will use the military's power to stall for time. At that moment, while the two girls were analyzing and discussing various rational strategies, the two gentlemen with crazy mechas in the male group were close to the exit of the Lego house. Ta-ta-ta ta-ta-ta ta-ta-ta. The Fugu gladiator ran forward with giant step. Xiao Tan, who sat in the main cabin, was as tired as a child. Brother Ju, on the other hand, was bored out of his mind. He held his chin with one hand and yawned in the co-pilot cabin. Speaking of which, shouldn't we ask Musashi to build a flying vehicle? It's the safest and fastest way to approach the enemy from the air. Xiao Tan complained between heavy breaths. If that's the case, then wouldn't it be more convenient for us to approach the enemy from the top of the shelf, or for me to use Jeppo to bring you to a higher place to approach the target? Feng Bujue said. That's right. Xiao Tan added. Yes, of course, I've thought of all these plans. Feng Bujue added, but if that's the case, won't I be the one who's so tired that my tongue is hanging out? Xiao Tan said angrily, you're just trying to scam your teammate. That's not it. Feng Bujue used his hands as a pillow and leaned against the seat. Don't forget, it was you who crawled into the main cockpit. 1 second later, there was a loud slap. It was probably Xiao Tan giving himself a slap. There's something coming out, Laughing Soul suddenly said. Seeing that she didn't fire, Passing Rain knew that something was wrong. She aimed the binoculars at the area before the Lego house. When she saw the thing that appeared in her sight, she put the binoculars down, rubbed her eyes and then raised them again. I'll bet 50 cents that Bujue is inside, Passing Rain said in a cold and flat tone. This Lego monster was built by the two idiots, right? Laughing Soul replied in a tone that said, these two idiots are beyond saving. If this is a toy that originally existed in the scenario, Passing Rain said, then it will never be sold. Furthermore, the toys wouldn't have wandered out during the security patrol. As Laughing Soul spoke, she loaded the sniper rifle with a special bullet. This is interesting. If the vehicle that they're on suddenly explodes, will they be able to survive? Her lips curled up into a wicked smile, and the gun in her hand was already aimed at the Fugu gladiator's torso. Bang! The moment Laughing Soul pulled the trigger, a thunderous boom tore through the air, and a bullet glowing with a green light shot through the air. Chapter 371. Name: Armor-piercing incendiary bullet. Item type: consumable. Quality: excellent. Special effect: it will explode after penetrating the target's first layer of defense. If it fails to penetrate the first layer of defense, it will explode, but its damage will be halved. Usage requirement: marksmanship C or workmanship B. Remark: made from depleted uranium alloy with the aid of liquid propellant. It has high penetrative power, and the explosion effect is fire elemental damage. This kind of special ammunition could be found quite often at the auction house. Most of them were expensive, and they were sold for more than HP potions, 12,000 game coins. However, those who had used it before knew that, as long as one held one in one's hand, one could use it to change the direction of the battle or even decide the outcome of the battle. In the current thriller paradise, most of the above-average teams were attracted to players who specialized in marksmanship because they had the ability to turn the tide of battle into victory. Furthermore, this kind of damage could be obtained at a relatively low cost. If it was a fighting mastery player who wanted a weapon that could turn the tide of a battle, the price would be at least 6-digit. However, shooting mastery players did not need that. They only needed a normal gun and a bullet that cost more than 10,000 game coins, and they could deal damage that could only be achieved by fighting mastery players with hundreds of thousands of game coins. Even though bullets were consumables and would disappear after they were fired, looking at it from another perspective, it was not something that should be used as soon as they were bought. They could be treated as a kind of insurance or a trump card. They would only be used at the most opportune and crucial moment. Perhaps they would only be used after many scenarios. Based on this calculation, if one were to buy 30 of these bullets and equip them with a medium-grade gun, they would be able to use them for a very long time. Perhaps the equipment that the fighting mastery players spent hundreds of thousands of game coins on was already obsolete, and the shooting mastery players still had bullet. For a female tycoon like Gu Xiaoling, choosing this mastery was a bit of a waste. Currently, it was publicly acknowledged on the gaming forum that the most expensive mastery to train was workmanship and summoning. Marksmanship and sleuthing were two masteries that could be achieved with little money. Of course, if it was purely for the money, the mastery would not have mattered. After all, it was just a bullet that cost 10,000 game coins. If converted to RMB, it would only cost 6 or 7 RMB per pill. As long as he spent 50,000 renminbi, he could even buy a Gatling gun filled with special bullets and shoot at the enemy. Back to the topic at hand, the armor-piercing incendiary bullet tore through the air and hit the outer shell of the pufferfish gladiator. Even though in the scenario, the toughness of the toys was shocking, Laughing Soul's shot was not something that could be blocked by the Lego brick. TSS, TSS, TSS. After a series of short and continuous strange sounds, the bullets penetrated the outer shell of the pufferfish gladiator and penetrated its body. Coincidentally, the location of the bullet was very subtle. It happened to be in the area between the main cockpit and the co-pilot cabin. If the bullet had been slightly off target and shot into either of the two cockpits, it would have exploded in midair. Its energy would be fully released, and it would cause considerable damage to the pilot in the enclosed environment. However, the bullet was embedded in the building block and ignited, and the result was boom, patter, patter, patter. After the explosion, there was the sound of many pieces of Lego bricks scattering. An unexpected scene happened. The pufferfish gladiator was blown in half. The front half was a large, round fish head. The back half was a thinner fish tail and 2 legs. The two pilots were in relatively good condition inside the cockpit, but both of them had lost 35% of their life points. Xiao Tan, who was inside the fish head, was basically a sitting duck. But since he was stunned by the sudden explosion, he would not be able to escape in a short amount of time. Feng Bujue, who was inside the fish tail, soon came to the correct conclusion about what was happening. It's an armor-piercing, incendiary bullet. The 4 members of Underworld Frontline know each other's equipment and skills very well. That was a wise choice, but it seems like luck is not on our side because it failed to explode in midair. As he mumbled to himself, he reached out to press the buttons before him. After all, the pufferfish gladiator had died before it even started, so he might as well try to see if there were any weapons that were still working. But the combat ability of the pufferfish gladiator was far beyond normal people's imagination. After Brother Ju pressed the buttons randomly, 5 things happened. 1. The fish head, that had lost contact with the co-pilot, suddenly received the command from the weapon system. It suddenly bulged, and many sharp spikes grew out from its surface. 2. The fins started to spin like a chainsaw. 3. The theme song for Piggy in a Sunny Day, A Genuine Smile, started to play inside the co-pilot cabin. 4. The back half of the pufferfish gladiator, with the connecting point of the 2 legs as the axis, started to change. The cockpit turned 90 degrees upward, and the legs underneath were fixed in a half-squatting position. 5. A launch tube popped out from the top of the co-pilot cabin at a 45-degree angle, and it fired a round cannonball directly upward. 10 seconds later, the cannonball went straight up and down and landed precisely inside the barrel. There was a small explosion, and it caused Feng Bujue to lose another 10% of his life points due to the impact of the explosion. The monster is still moving even after being split in half. Laughing Soul's eyes wandered between the 2 halves of the pufferfish gladiator. Furthermore, the 2 halves have become even more disgusting than before. Passing Rain added. Laughing Soul glanced at the enemy's status in the game menu. After confirming that Brother Ju and Xiao Tan were still alive, she said, the 2 halves of the Lego monster have changed after the explosion. This means that there are people controlling both sides. She made a logical deduction. Even though the process was not completely correct, the conclusion was not wrong. But the thing's movement is so strange. It looks like the driver is messing around with the controls, Passing Rain said. Then, there are 3 possibilities. Laughing Soul's mind turned quickly, and she soon replied. 1. The leader and Xiao Tan have not mastered the usage of this Lego vehicle. 2. The thing has malfunctioned, and it cannot be operated normally. 3. These actions are purposely faked to confuse us. Then, Passing Rain signaled for her to continue. Actually, no matter which one it is, it has no effect on us. As Laughing Soul said that, she loaded another armor-piercing bullet into the sniper rifle and said with a smile, just one more shot. Just as Laughing Soul prepared to fire the last shot at the weird-looking pufferfish's tail, Feng Bujue, who was inside it, pressed the button that came with the warning sign of a nuclear weapon. "I don't believe that crazy primary school student can make a nuclear bomb out of Lego," Feng Bujue screamed when he pressed the button. Whoosh, whoosh. That was the sound of a rocket blasting into the sky. The pufferfish gladiator, which was in a squatting position, shot out a thick flame from its tail. The connection between the legs and the torso was severed. The powerful thrusters of the fishtail sent the fuselage, which had been turned 90 degrees upward, into the sky. "Hey! Is this thing itself a warhead?" Feng Bujue was deeply shocked. "There is a happy song playing inside the cockpit, and it has launched a suicide attack." Laughing Soul and Passing Rain, who were at the top of the shelf, raised their heads from behind the scope and put down the binoculars. Both of them looked at the sudden light in the dark and the slowly rising pufferfish gladiator. Their faces were expressionless, and they were stunned. Xiao Tan was very lucky. At this moment, when no one was paying attention to him, he recovered from his shock. He pushed open the cover of the cockpit and poked his head out to look. He did not expect to see the pufferfish gladiator rocket blasting into the sky. What the hell? Xiao Tan could not close his mouth. "Are we going to ascend to heaven?" Don't panic," Feng Bujue inside the pufferfish gladiator said to himself. "At this moment, we only need to find the time machine." No. He forced himself to stop from complaining. "Fine, let me think about this calmly. This thing has no target, so it will fly straight into the ceiling of the supermarket. Therefore, I only need to open the cover and jump out. Then, I can use Jeppo to escape." With that in mind, he thought, but this feat will undoubtedly attract the attention of Passing Rain and Laughing Soul. After I open the cover, I might be attacked directly. The reality matched Feng Bujue's assumption. After the temporary shock, Laughing Soul raised the sniper rifle and aimed at the pufferfish gladiator that was already beyond the sniping point. Several seconds later, the cover really did open. At that moment, Laughing Soul focused on aiming at the hatch. But almost at the same time as the cover opened with a bang, the shell on the other side of the pufferfish gladiator was broken from the inside. Following the Lego blocks that fell out, a red glow figure jumped out from the hole. He used Jeppo to cover 1 meter in the blink of an eye and rushed to the top of the shelf that was closest to him. Feng Bujue's diversion tactic was very successful. He knew that the moment he opened the cover, the enemy's attention would be focused on the exit of the cockpit. At this moment, his opportunity came. As long as he opened a hole on the other side and used body enhancement spell to rush out, Laughing Soul, who was aiming at the hatch, would not be able to change her aim in time. After all, this was not Counter-Strike, where one move of the mouse would result in a 60-degree swing. It was practically impossible to hit the target with a flick while holding a heavy sniper rifle with one's hand. "Xiao Tan has discovered our location. He's running up the wall." When Passing Rain said that, she had already rushed forward. The direction she was heading was the shelf that Feng Bujue was at. "Okay, leave it to me." Laughing Soul naturally understood what her cousin meant. She carried the sniper rifle to the edge of the shelf. When she looked down, she saw Xiao Tan running up the edge of the shelf. Such an idiot! Go half a circle to the side before going up the wall. She grumbled as she aimed the scope at Xiao Tan's legs. On the other side, after a few leaps, Passing Rain arrived at the top of the shelf that Feng Bujue had jumped onto earlier, but the latter had already disappeared. Relying on her instinct, Passing Rain continued to chase in a certain direction. At that moment, she had already put the night vision binoculars back into her backpack. The weapon in her hand had changed to the holy sword. Boom! There was another loud boom. It was the rocket that had hit the ceiling and exploded. This thing was quite powerful for a toy, but it was not as powerful as a nuclear bomb. It was more like a firecracker, but the pieces that it scattered were more dangerous than paper. The environment of the supermarket would not be damaged by the attack of a toy, but this rocket had triggered the automatic fire protection system. The lights of the supermarket came on at that moment, and the sprinklers on the ceiling started to spray water. For the players who had been shrunk, this was like a sudden downpour. "Yo, that wet beauty over there." Feng Bujue's voice suddenly came from behind Passing Rain. "Are you looking for me?" Passing Rain slowly turned around. She raised her hand to push the hair on her forehead back to prevent the wet hair from blocking her vision. Perhaps it was the effect of the light and the mist. Her face appeared exceptionally pale and blurry. Feng Bujue had not seen Passing Rain like this before. "You're not going to run anymore?" she asked. "You'll notice me soon after I switch on the lights," Feng Bujue said. "Furthermore, I didn't plan to run in the first place." He also pushed his hair back, using the water to make it look like a swept-back hairstyle. "I'm the stronger one, right? Look, I could have ambushed you from behind, but I greeted you first." "Humph!" Passing Rain laughed. It was a smile, but it was also a sneer. "I rarely see you smile at me," Feng Bujue said. "I don't smile at anyone," Passing Rain replied. "So you're not targeting me," Feng Bujue said. "Can we talk about this later?" Passing Rain tried to change the topic. "After all, everyone is soaked like a drowned rat, so it doesn't matter anymore," Feng Bujue said. "If you want to talk, do it offline another day." Passing Rain raised her sword. "If you continue to stand there so fearlessly and empty-handed, you'll have to bear the consequences. Offline or on the phone." Feng Bujue still sounded relaxed, and he brought the topic back. "You want to meet me, right?" Passing Rain said. "No, no, no, no." Feng Bujue shook his head. Passing Rain looked at each other in silence. Yes. Brother Ju was defeated by her gaze and told the truth. "So, you already know that I live in City S?" Passing Rain asked. Of course, with my investigative skills." Feng Bujue was just about to boast. "If you lose to me," Passing Rain interrupted, "you'd better be prepared to be arrested as a stalker." "Hey! It's suddenly a threat." Feng Bujue was shocked, but then he paused and asked, "If I win?" Chapter 372. Using the title skill, Flying Scorpion's Mark, Xiao Tan ran along the edge of the shelf, heading toward Laughing Soul. He knew Laughing Soul's weakness: she was too weak in close combat. It was too weak, and not relatively weak or average. Therefore, close combat was advantageous for Xiao Tan, and it was the only way for him to win. But things were not as simple as he thought. Laughing Soul was weak in close combat because she was strong in other areas. Most of the enemies would not even have the chance to get close to her before they were killed. Excellent long-distance fighting ability and superior intellect, such a player would be hard to deal with. When the enemy got close to her, she could come up with many ways to stop them. Such an idiot. If this was a competition, they wouldn't be so kind as to aim at your leg, Laughing Soul grumbled as she aimed at Xiao Tan's leg. She was being merciful. Even the bullets in the sniper rifle were replaced with normal bullets and did not use any special bullet. Bang! The gunshot rang out, and the moment the bullet was fired, Xiao Tan used almost zero time difference to change his running path, and used wind stops the dust and the fragrant flowers are gone. The bullet pierced through the afterimage that lasted for 3 seconds, and Xiao Tan himself was unharmed. "Oh!" Laughing Soul was startled. The miss was out of her expectation. Interesting, he managed to evade it on his own. She aimed and prepared to fire a second shot. Unexpectedly, she saw an unbelievable scene through the scope. Xiao Tan started to move in a zigzag pattern. Every 1 to 2 seconds, he would release a shadow. Not bad. This time, Laughing Soul had a whole new level of respect for him. Using the shadow to create visual misdirection, combined with the irregular movement that keeps changing direction, even the running speed and the frequency of the skills are constantly changing. She smiled. A sniper's nightmare. After she said that in a relaxed tone, Laughing Soul took out 2 submachine guns from her inventory. One of them was the MP5 that she had been using, and the other was the Uzi that she had recently gotten. Name: Uzi. Item type: weapon quality, normal attack, medium attribute, none effect, none prerequisite, marksmanship F. Remarks: reliable, light, easy to operate, and low cost. Level 30 players were far stronger than normal people in the real world. Even a woman could use the Desert Eagle single-handedly like a governor. Therefore, it was easy for Laughing Soul to wield 2 mini submachine guns in battle. Tap tap tap. 2 submachine guns, with extremely fast firing speed, poured out a large number of bullets within a few seconds. Xiao Tan's current position was not too far away from the top of the container. Facing the barrage of bullets that enveloped him from a short distance, he was truly helpless. In an instant, he was hit by more than 10 bullets. Needless to say, he was inflicted with a bleed effect. What was even more troublesome was that the injury affected his movement. It was difficult for him to change directions like just now, so there was no point in using an afterimage. Seeing the Laughing Soul before him, he could not take another step forward. If he stopped now, he would fall, and all his previous efforts would be wasted. In this fleeting moment, most people would not have the time to come up with a plan, but there was something in Wang Tongji's blood that told him what to do. Let's take a gamble. At that moment, his expression turned cold. The usual gentleness in his eyes disappeared, and there was an indescribable hostility radiating from between his brows. Using the military knife in his hand, Xiao Tan used reverse spinning slash on the vertical edge of the container. A 75% success rate for a level C mastery was not low, so the activation of the skill was not a problem. Using the movement derived from the skill, he held the military knife in a reverse grip and used the wall to spin upward. Laughing Soul did not expect the enemy to attack instead of retreating, so she was caught off guard. After firing for about 10 seconds, the bullets in her 2 guns were almost empty. With a gun in each hand, she couldn't quickly change the magazine. Therefore, the situation was turned around in an instant. The reverse spinning slash not only helped Xiao Tan reach the top of the container, it also deflected some of the bullets that came at him, minimizing the damage that he suffered. Laughing Soul had no choice but to retreat and run away to create some distance between them. He really came up. When Laughing Soul said that, it was hard to tell whether she was happy or sad. In any case, at this point, she had to accept this fact. Once we're on the same level, the advantage of the terrain is no longer there. Furthermore, he moves faster than me, so it's only a matter of time before he reaches me. In the blink of an eye, the shadow behind Laughing Soul closed in on her like lightning, not giving her any chance to breathe. Bang bang bang! Laughing Soul decisively put the guns in her backpack and pulled out 2 more guns from the holster around her waist to provide suppressive fire. As she pulled out the guns, she turned and slid. Her original plan of running away with her back facing the enemy changed to a horizontal movement, facing the enemy head-on. Xiao Tan's life points had taken quite a bit of damage from the explosion earlier, and when he rushed up the container, he had taken quite a bit of damage. It would be difficult for him to survive another powerful attack. Therefore, he had to prioritize evasion, just in case. With this delay, the distance between the two was pulled back several steps, and this gave Laughing Soul the chance to reload. She took out the MP5 again and grabbed a magazine from the pocket of her Special Forces outfit. As she ran, she said, "If I'm not mistaken, your reverse spinning slash has a cooldown of 1 minute. That is indeed a killer move that poses a great threat to me. 1. It can shorten the distance, 2. It can deflect bullets, and 3. It can cause damage. You can say that it is a combination of offense and defense." Laughing Soul tried to remind the man. "But, based on my estimation, your life points should be less than 20% now. At this distance, you won't be able to last more than 1 minute with that bit of life point." She paused for a second before continuing. My suggestion is, you should drink a health potion and maintain the close distance. When the cooldown of the skill is over, you can end the battle in one hit. Or you should give up on the chase and leave my sight so that you can find another chance to sneak up on me. Even though I know you mean well, Xiao Tan said coldly. But when a man is serious about something, don't tell him what to do. At this point, he exploded with incredible speed and charged at Laughing Soul. What? Laughing Soul's heart raced, and her blood boiled. How dare you talk to me like that? How dare you? Without a doubt, she was angered, and she fired at Chun Gu with all her might. However, Xiao Tan managed to evade all of them. He repeatedly used Wine Stops Dust. The Fragrant Flower has ended, which had a cooldown of 1 second, and Devil Bat Ghostly Shadow, which had a cooldown of 5 seconds. With his unpredictable footwork, he maintained the existence of more than 3 illusions while his charge speed did not decrease. This was not only the nightmare of a sniper but also the nightmare of any long-range weapon user. In Laughing Soul's eyes, there appeared to be 3 Wang Tongji charging at her, and they were so close and far that it was impossible to tell which one was real. This kid. This time, Laughing Soul was really spooked. She swung her gun left and right and fired blindly as she retreated quickly. However, if she did that, she would be relying on luck. No matter how high her mastery was, it would be useless. Furthermore, she was just a grade C. Finally, when Reverse Whirlwind Slash finished its cooldown, Xiao Tan was less than 5 steps away from Laughing Soul. I'm sorry, the result has been. Xiao Tan did not manage to finish the word because Laughing Soul had also used her trump card. She suddenly moved in the opposite direction and jumped into Xiao Tan's arms, wrapping her arms around his waist. Xiao Tan, who was about to use his skill, was shocked. He did not expect something like that. Laughing Soul was forced into a corner, and that was why she came up with this plan. She was not in a good mood. Not only had she been yelled at by Xiao Tan, she was about to lose. Therefore, she had nowhere to vent her anger. She wished she could run forward to strangle Xiao Tan's neck and pull out his hair. The grappling came so suddenly that Xiao Tan was unable to use any of his skills. What happened next was completely out of control. After the two of them collided, they fell to the side and fell forward. They flew out from the top of the container, tangled together, and fell to the ground. So, it's a mutual destruction, huh? Xiao Tan had returned to his normal self in midair. He looked at the ceiling that was moving further and further away from him. Without a doubt, the 2 players who had been shrunk to the size of toys would definitely die if they fell from such a height. Go to hell, go to hell, go to hell, go to hell. Laughing Soul did not seem like she was going to give up so easily. In midair, she managed to strangle Xiao Tan from behind and yanked on his hair. Ah! Ouch! What are you doing? Xiao Tan's life points did not drop that much, but it was painful. Ah! I can't take it anymore. I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. At the same time, at the top of another container. It seems like it's over there as well. Passing Rain used her cold gaze to look at Feng Bujue, who was lying in a pool of blood. Feng Bujue heard that and looked at the game menu. Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul's status were both dead. He was about to open his mouth to reply when he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Cough. Cough. Is it a mutual destruction? I didn't expect that. Brother Ju smiled bitterly. Of course. I also didn't expect to be beaten up so badly by you. You still have one more skill. Passing Rain waved the holy sealing sword lightly, and the blood on the blade disappeared instantly. Quick, use Descent of the War Demon. Just think of it as a warm-up. Ha! Feng Bujue licked the blood on his lip. Before I use the ultimate skill, do you mind if I ask, what is with your ridiculous combat ability? Just like you, it's Soul's Eye, Passing Rain replied. Feng Bujue was confused. I see, but why are you so strong? Why aren't you on the combat ability ranking? Because your soul's eye can be used continuously, Passing Rain replied. And mine can be used instantly. So, it's a power that varies from person to person, Feng Bujue said. Okay. I'm sorry. Why are you apologizing? Because I got second place on the combat ability ranking, and I was too proud of myself. Now it looks like I brought this upon myself. There's no need to apologize. You've always been like this. Chapter 373. When Passing Rain said, like you, she is a soul's eye, several questions popped up in Feng Bujue's mind. Even though he had shared almost all the information he had with his teammates since he entered the game, there were a few things that he still kept to himself. For example, his encounter with Woody in the login lobby, his interactions with several anomalies, and the term soul's eye. However, Passing Rain's words showed that she not only knew about the existence of soul's eye, she also knew about Feng Bujue's power. I get it now. She should have awakened it a long time ago. Feng Bujue thought about it for a few seconds and came up with a logical explanation. Perhaps she didn't know what this power was initially, but later she found out about the term soul's eye. If it was me, I would have tried to find a way to get to the bottom of this. Today, when she found out that the person who suddenly rose to second place on the combat stat ranking was me, she immediately came to the conclusion that my sudden rise in ranking was caused by the awakening of Soul's Eye. And in the battle earlier, she noticed that my power type is different from hers. Wait a minute, in that case, she knows more about Soul's Eye than I do. After we leave the scenario, I'll have to ask her about it? These thoughts flashed through his mind, but it was not the time to delve into them. Even if Passing Rain did not attack, the bleeding effect would not wait for him. If he did not activate Descent of the War Demon soon, Feng Bujue would turn into white light. Then, I shall not hold back, Feng Bujue said and activated his title skill. Darkness. Endless darkness. Soundless, breathless, colorless, tasteless. Here, low-dimensional creatures would involuntarily question their own existence. Because they had lost all their senses, only their consciousness remained. What is going on? Feng Bujue could not tell whether the question came from his mouth or from his heart. At that moment, Feng Bujue had lost his 5 senses. Even if he could speak, he would not be able to hear it. 1 second ago, I was lying on top of the container. How did this happen? Feng Bujue mumbled. Is this some kind of illusion? Game bug? What made him feel uneasy was that he was clearly in non-sleep mode, but he couldn't even feel his own body in the real world. Furthermore, the game menu was no longer working. Could it be that the unknown shadow in my mind has finally acted up? Feng Bujue was a person who always prepared for the worst, so he began to suspect that he might have suddenly died in the gaming pod. Another pitiful soul. Suddenly, a low voice entered his ears. Who is it? King of Hell? Satan? Hades? Anubis? Brother Ju asked for 4 names in one breath. Judging from the identities of these 4 people, Feng Bujue knew where he would go after his death. He had thought about it a long time ago. Even if the so-called underworld did exist in this universe, he would definitely not go to heaven. But you are somewhat different. The voice did not answer Feng Bujue's question, but said to itself, I can't smell your fear and helplessness. It paused. Why is that? Helplessness is not my style. Feng Bujue replied. When he said the second sentence, he realized that the moment the voice appeared, his hearing had already recovered. As for fear, forgive me for being powerless. The voice muttered. Fine, insignificant ant, what business do you have here? Where is this? Feng Bujue could only answer the question with a question because he really did not know how to answer. This is my prison, the voice replied. So, who are you? Feng Bujue asked in a very impatient tone. It looked like he really did not like to ask the same question twice. Who am I? Who am I? The voice repeated, as if it was muttering to itself. I really can't remember. You don't remember who you are, only remember that you are locked in a cage. Feng Bujue said casually. Yes, I have been imprisoned for too long. The tone of the voice became sorrowful. Although there are occasionally one or two lowly creatures that come here, as long as you stay in the same space with me for too long, you insignificant existences will be gradually and unconsciously devoured and absorbed by me. In the end, only endless darkness and loneliness accompanied me. Just based on this sentence, it's not strange that you were locked up. Feng Bujue said, I am very curious which Daluo Golden Immortal imprisoned you, who knows? The voice replied. A long, long time ago, I firmly remembered that name. Even after I forgot my own name, I did not forget the name of my enemy. I thought, even the ice and snow of 100,000 winters would not be able to cool my anger. Only by tasting the taste of revenge would my anger be appeased. However, in the end, I forgot. I forgot the other party's appearance, forgot the other party's name, and even forgot the reason why I was locked up here. The more Feng Bujue heard, the more annoyed he became. Fine, my friend who refuses to answer my questions, looks like you have nothing to tell me. You should leave, the voice said earnestly. If you stay here, it won't take long for you to be swallowed up. Ah, I really don't want to stay here for long, Feng Bujue said. But I can't even feel my own body now, how can I? You came here on your own, the voice interrupted. As long as you can remember why you are here, you can go back. That's why. I just don't know how I. Feng Bujue's words were at the tip of his tongue, but his mind buzzed. Yes, I used a skill, and then. He immediately said to the voice, I say, Mr. Nameless Prisoner. The word demonization, does it sound familiar to you? Demonization. The other party heard this and was silent for a few seconds. Ha, ha 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 ha. What followed was a burst of terrifying laughter. This reaction seems to mean that you know something, Feng Bujue said. I understand why you are here. After a while, the voice stopped laughing and said in a low voice, If you want to demonize, it's very easy. In the darkness, there was suddenly the sound of a giant creature breathing deeply. The next second, an unprecedented feeling of pain instantly swallowed Feng Bujue's consciousness. It was as if the flames from the deepest part of hell were roasting his soul. This feeling was obviously far beyond the limits of the game. Under normal circumstances, he would have fainted long ago. However, Feng Bujue was sober as he experienced every bit of bone-piercing and soul-eating torture. Time seemed to have stopped, but it also seemed to be eternal. After an unknown amount of time, Feng Bujue saw light again. The coolness of the water on his body made him feel as if he had been reborn. Everything just now was both real and illusory. It was hard to tell what was real and what was not. Only the pain of his soul burning was unforgettable. At this time, Feng Bujue found himself still on the shelf, but his body was enveloped in a black ball of Do Qi. The black energy was like a flame that surged around his body. Even an expert like Passing Rain couldn't get close to him because of the invisible force. This is demonization, Feng Bujue said to himself. The look in his eyes changed. Passing Rain thought, is he getting serious? Head, it's called the power of the demon god. It's well deserved. Feng Bujue smirked and said with an evil smile. This transformation only lasts 3 minutes. I advise you to save the time to be amazed. Passing Rain kindly reminded him. Don't worry. Feng Bujue interrupted her. 3 minutes is enough. When Passing Rain heard the word enough, she understood Brother Bujue's meaning. She didn't waste any more time. She lightly tapped the ground and suddenly attacked. The sainthood blade slashed down. It looked like a slow and gentle movement, but it exploded with destructive power. The sword flashed and the line was cut. The shelf that was as big as a cliff for players was cut off by this slash. The cut-off part slowly fell down like a landslide. But Feng Bujue, who jumped in the air and dodged the slash, still maintained a calm expression and said, not bad. Chapter 374. 50% of your sword, 70% of your luck, and you still have such power. Feng Bujue muttered, looks like I wasn't even qualified to fight with you just now. As he spoke, he had already activated the body enhancement technique and used the Jeppo to accelerate. His body turned from solid to illusory as he pounced on Passing Rain. Passing Rain's eyes changed slightly, and her murderous aura became colder. She rotated the holy seal in her hand, and a sharp sword aura whizzed out. Feng Bujue did not show any weakness. He used the Rankyaku kick to meet the attack, and kicked out a black arc of light. With a shout, the two slashes collided in the air. The energy exploded, and the turbulence spread in all directions. Feng Bujue was in the air and was greatly affected. He was forced to retreat a few steps. After this move, he was obviously at a disadvantage. It's not over yet, Passing Rain said, and the long sword in her hand immediately moved again. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The sword aura was like layers of waves, continuously slashing. Passing Rain's sword was extremely fast. When the others saw it, the sword had turned into a shadow. As expected, Feng Bujue replied lazily, and immediately used the Jeppo to stabilize his body. At the same time, he used dozens of Rankyaku kicks to meet the sword aura. At this time, the fire sprinklers on the ceiling had been turned off, but the humidity in the surroundings was still very high. The slashes from the two of them exploded in the air, sending out waves of dense air, creating a rare scene. Not good. More powerful than I thought. Feng Bujue thought to himself. Although on the surface, he acted like he was invincible, but in fact, he knew best. After the transformation, his strength and speed were only 3 times his original. This level of improvement was actually not much different from the body enhancement technique. It was just that Descent of the War Demon also had the effect of tripling his survival value, as well as unlimited stamina and spiritual energy. Therefore, skills like the Rankyaku kick and the Jeppo with no cooldown time could be used at will. In addition, if he used the body enhancement technique now, the effect would be stacked, and his strength would be equivalent to 6 times his original state. However, even so, his strength was only about the same as Passing Rain's. Because Soul's Eye. Let's talk about Feng Bujue first. His Soul's Eye was a continuous, zero-time difference calculation. This ability seems to be somewhat similar to observation hockey, but they are 2 different things. Zero-time difference calculation was not to predict the opponent's attack intent, but to calculate the most reasonable response that one could make with one's own strength at the moment when the attack had already occurred, and to implement it accurately. The only problem with this ability was that prediction and calculation required a basis. Whether attacking or being attacked, the Soul's Eyes calculation was built on the basis of intelligence. For example, if you want to dodge a bullet, you have to at least have a concept of the bullet's flying speed and trajectory. You have to know the speed of sound straight line. Otherwise, your calculation will be wrong, and your reaction will also be wrong. Using the battle between Brother Ju and Shiva as an example, the reason he was able to win so easily was because when his soul eye awakened, he had been fighting Shiva for a long time. Therefore, he had a very clear understanding of Shiva's physical skills, and the firing speed of his spiritual weapons. And the more accurate the information was, the more perfect the response would be. Using Little Red Riding Hood as an example, even though Feng Bujue did not fight her face to face, he could still construct a basic concept in his mind. For example, her punch is faster than a bullet, and one slap can turn me into a pancake. Based on this, using the Soul's Eye to calculate the result of I rushed up to hit her, there would be die. Anyway, There are thousands of ways to die, Brother Ju's Soul's Eye was more or less like this. Let's talk about like rain. Like Heroine's Soul's Eye was extreme efficiency, which was instant use. This ability usually did not take effect, and there was no data that could be quantified, so the system could not include it in the combat effectiveness, which was why Like Rain was ranked outside the top 20. However, the effect of this Soul's Eye was still excellent. When the player entered the state of extreme efficiency, all the flaws in the action would be corrected, and the consumption would be minimized. Here are a few more examples. Let's talk about running. Why can long-distance runners still stand after running 10,000 meters, but people like me can't get up halfway? Other than the hard conditions of muscle, weight, and lung capacity, the most important thing was the method. For the same distance, using a reasonable movement, rhythm, and breathing to run would definitely save stamina compared to a layman running blindly. Let's talk about breaking bricks. It was the same arm, but the skin wrapped around the bones and flesh. Why can someone break a brick with one palm, but I can only break the palm bone with one palm? It was the same reason. After arduous training, muscle memory would become a part of instinct, and the reflexes would increase by several times. When speed, strength, and skill all combined at one point, one could do things that normal people could not. Extreme efficiency was the ability to keep people in this state at all times. When this Soul's Eye was activated, Like Rain could exert her strength to the theoretical limit. The same action of swinging a sword, she could do it faster and stronger, but the consumption of stamina would be lower. Of course, such an overpowered method naturally had its weakness. Although this Soul's Eye did not consume any points in the game, it required the player's mental strength to bear it. Once the player lost focus, the effect could not be maintained. Comparing Brother Ju and Like Rain's Soul's Eye, it could be seen that Like Rain's Soul's Eye increased the player's strength more. She was like a bullet that could not be dodged. As long as she was strong enough, no matter how Feng Bujue calculated and adapted, he could not overcome the absolute gap in numbers. However, there was another variable at this moment, and that was Descent of the War Demon. The effect of this title skill was not only what was written in the skill description. Feng Bujue had already noticed that after demonizing, his realm was different. There was a joke: the life of a tofu seller, the heart of a prime minister. Feng Bujue was more or less like this. His realm was already at the level of a martial arts master, but his body was still at the level of a second-rate sect disciple. He could see Like Rain's strength, but it was difficult to match her strength. However, an expert was an expert. In the blink of an eye, Feng Bujue's plan had succeeded, and he had a chance to win. Indeed, 3 minutes was enough. The mid-range slashes and sweeps were just probing moves by both sides. The real victory could be decided in 3 moves. In a split second, the black ball of battle energy in the air was covered in a red glow. Feng Bujue activated the body enhancement technique, and with the moon steps, he charged forward. This time, the speed and power of the attack were not something that could be forced back by sword chi. Seeing this, Like Rain was as calm as before. She changed her movement technique, withdrawing her momentum to avoid the strong force, and the tip of her sword to block, attacking and defending. In one step, Feng Bujue used the momentum of charging downwards, his hands holding several death poker cards as he attacked. The golden light flashed, and the cards fell into the gap between life and death. It was extremely dangerous. Like Rain coldly snorted, her sword blossoming like a lotus, cutting the cards one by one. As they clashed, there was the sound of metal clashing. Feng Bujue took advantage of the situation to move forward, and once again, he was one breath away from Like Rain. At this moment, the distance between the two was unprecedentedly close. They both knew each other's killing moves, and also knew what the other was going to do. Southern Dipper Flying Dragon Fist was undoubtedly Feng Bujue's killing move. Under the effect of Descent of the War Demon and Body Enhancement Technique, This was a well-deserved ultimate move. A normal scenario boss would not be able to survive this move. And like Rain's killing move was a sword move, 7 Clear Frost. The two used all their moves, pushing their skills, statuses, and souls to the limit. The sword and fist shadows intertwined, collided, and shattered in the air. In this frozen moment, the expression on the two's face was actually a smile. These two people, who were not normal in real life, seemed to have found some kind of tacit understanding, some kind of strange communication method that only they understood, and they were enjoying it. After a few seconds, the moves stopped, the fist and sword stopped, and the winner was decided. In the end, there was only one figure standing on top of the container. The other person had turned into white light and disappeared. Current quest completed. All main quests have been completed. You have completed the scenario. Automatic teleportation in 180 seconds. Hearing the system announcement, Feng Bujue gave a long sigh. He lowered his head to look at his bloodied hands. If not for the fact that I'm in demonized state, her sword skill would have directly interrupted my skill. Chapter 375. The scenario has been completed. Calculating reward. Obtained EXP, 70,000. Game coins, 100000. Obtained equipment, none. Accepted missions, 1/3. Completed special and hidden missions, 0. Unlocked world building, none. Time of terror points increase, 0. Highest terror points, 0%. Average terror points, 0%. Your terror rating is Embodiment of Valor. Extra reward obtained. Please select later. Obtain skill points. 1 950-inch additional bonus from skill points. EXP 19500. Game coins 100000. Scenario cleared reward. Puzzle card X2 calculation complete. Please continue. Before the countdown ended, Feng Bujue chose to return to the login lobby. This was because after the 3 minutes of descent of the war demon ended, his life points would be at 1%, and his stamina points and sorcery points would be at 0. Even if he stayed, he would not be able to do anything in those 180 seconds. From the calculation screen, the reward for this killing game was not that great. It was probably because he had only completed the main mission, so the EXP was not that great. Regarding the two side missions, the first one, join the classic camp and end the war, was naturally not going to be completed. When Musashi was creating the Blowfish Gladiator, Feng Bujue had reconsidered this problem. His speculation was that if he wanted to complete the side mission, it was best not to meet this NPC, the Prophet. Even if he did meet him, he should not say anything unnecessary. Then, the plot would not expand to the level of the 4 pillars of divinity, and the information that the players had would stop at the basic setting of Toy Story. Then, by following the other side mission, assist Jazz and Nightbeat to investigate the Lego house, the plot would unfold step by step, and in the end, they would win the war. Of course, this kind of victory was probably just a show created by the system. After the players left, the Prophet would return everything to normal. However, there was no point in discussing that now. Since he did not return to report to Optimus Prime, the investigation mission was not completed. In any case, this bit of EXP plus 40% should be enough for me to reach level 30. Feng Bujue said and clicked on the Accept option on the screen, responding to Xiao Tan's invitation to the conference room. He wasn't in a hurry to go to the storage room to get his reward. Since he had already decided to get the EXP, he could go later. Thus, he directly pressed the button for the conference room in the elevator operation area and walked out. Whoa. What are you doing? Are you going to sacrifice him to the heavens? As soon as Brother Ju entered the room, he saw Xiao Tan sitting at the conference table with crumbs all over his face. That's not bad. If you could fight in this space, you would be looking at a scene on the level of WWE, Xiao Tan said gloomily. You seem to be dissatisfied, Laughing Soul said from the side. No, Xiao Tan quickly said, absolutely not. Feng Bujue took a few steps forward and whispered to Passing Rain. They are, I don't know, Passing Rain replied. It's best if you don't ask about it. Feng Bujue turned around and sat down like nothing had happened. I'll go get my reward later and I'll reach level 30. Shouldn't we consider trying the team's nightmare difficulty? Hey, you're changing the topic already. You don't care about what happened to me. Xiao Tan roared. What's there to ask? Feng Bujue said weakly. It's nothing more than saying or doing things that shouldn't be said. Guild leader is wise, Laughing Soul added as she glared at Xiao Tan. As a man, kneel down and apologize, and you should be able to get the girl's forgiveness, Feng Bujue continued. Don't apply your behavior to everyone, Xiao Tan said. Feng Bujue narrowed his dead fish eyes and slowly turned to Laughing Soul. You too. Look at how pitiful this kid is, and he's often bullied by you. If there's nothing wrong with his principles, just forgive him. Based on my observation of the two of you, you're a perfect match. One of you is on the receiving end, and the other is on the receiving end. With time, perhaps the two of you will end up together. Pa. A bag of chips flew out from Laughing Soul's hand and landed on Feng Bujue's face. I told you to stay out of this, Passing Rain said coldly. And you're trying to shift the hatred to someone else. I've been mocking people for decades and I've never failed. Feng Bujue grabbed the chips from his face and shoved them into his mouth. You're bluffing again. Passing Rain shook her head and chuckled. Humph. Feng Bujue scoffed and used action to prove his point. He used less than a second to come up with his lines. He turned to Passing Rain and said, By the way, as a hardcore fan, don't you want to give birth to my child or something? Bah. Another bag of chips flew out from Passing Rain's hand and landed on Feng Bujue's face. Feng Bujue discussed the practice match with his teammates in the meeting room and then talked about other things. This time, he even shared the setting of Soul's Eye. Just like that, it was already midnight. They agreed to meet at the server in sleeping mode before going offline to take a shower. On the morning of April 24th, at 12:45 a.m., Feng Bujue logged into the game again. This time, he logged in 10 minutes earlier to deal with some trivial matters so that his teammates would not have to wait for him again. The first thing he did was to claim the reward. There was no need to go into detail about what he did after entering the storage room. In conclusion, after obtaining 40% EXP from his current level and drawing 2 new puzzle cards, Feng Bujue's stats were as follows. Title: Pioneer of Darkness. Title ability: Descent of the War Demon EXP 398003000000. Skill points 19450. Game coins 176500. Mastery: General ability C, Workmanship D, Sleuthing D, Fighting C, Marksmanship D, Medic E, Sorcery C, Summoning E. Inventory 1/15 Mario's Wrench, Flashlight, Stool of the 18 Bronze Statues, Number 5, SCP-510/20, Anti-Gravity Gun, Miss Moxie's Bad Temper, Belle of Jean Gang, Persephone's Vacuum Cleaner, Life Points Recovery Potion, X2 Endless Grenade. Magazine, WJQ-308 Military Shovel, Indestructible. Equipment: Jazz Shoes, Spiderweb Gloves, Death Poker, Sorcery Weapon, Echo Armor, Goblin Mask, Artemis's Embrace, Reproductive Alchemy Amplification Device. Storage: 6 out of 10 Puzzle Card, Monkey, Puzzle Card, Sunglasses, Puzzle Card, Strawberry, Puzzle Card, Leather Jacket, Puzzle Card, Motorcycle, Puzzle Card, Shotgun. Skills column, 712. Not So Hasty Repair, Body Enhancement Technique, Ice Alchemist's Persistence. The Southern Dipper, Flying Dragon Fist. The Summon, Musashi Koganu Jeppo. From level 30 onwards, the EXP cap had increased by another 0. It was now 3 million. In a way, this was good news for Fong Bujue. With his advantage of not feeling fear, the amount of EXP that he could gain with every level increased to a shocking amount. The other thing worth mentioning was the increase in his summoning mastery. Since he had repeatedly used TAA during the battle for the cape, he had done more than 10 random summons. Therefore, his mastery of this mastery was already very high. Therefore, after summoning Musashi Kogensui twice, his mastery of this mastery had increased by 1 level. Currently, Fong Bujue's character mission, which was to use summoning skills and summon creatures 50 times, had a completion rate of 1,750. It looked like he would need at least half a month to complete this step. These few cards. Fong Bujue accepted the reward and was about to place the puzzle cards into the storage when he suddenly noticed something. He pulled out all the puzzle cards and opened the virtual menu before him. He selected the Combine option. The system prompt immediately sounded. Found a possible combination sequence. The window in front of him showed deck name, T800 Terminator, consumes puzzle card, sunglasses puzzle card, leather jacket puzzle card, motorcycle and puzzle card, shotgun to form a combination. A card set that requires 4 cards to form. Fong Bujue mumbled, I smell the scent of perfect equipment. You have chosen to form the card set, T800, please confirm. As the 4 cards dissolved into white light and reassembled, a card the size of a tarot card appeared in Fong Bujue's hand. The card was printed with the image of a tough guy wearing sunglasses, riding a motorcycle, wearing a leather jacket, and holding a gun. It was in an ink painting style. It was very out of place. The system said again, the card set has been formed, would you like to exchange it for equipment? After selecting yes, a column of white light appeared on the other side of the storage room. It quickly turned into a glass column for receiving the reward. When Fong Bujue got closer, the equipment had already been formed. It looked like a strange machine, about the size of an accordion. The structure was very complicated. There was an entrance on one side, but there was no exit on the other side, only a circular convex lens. There was only a lever next to the machine, and there were no other parts that could be adjusted. He was already feeling uneasy, so he quickly took out the item and examined it. Name: Zero Magic Disintegrator. Type: Tool. Quality: Trash. Function: Creates trash. Special effect: There is a certain chance of creating a legendary item. At least 3 pieces of equipment with quality not lower than excellent are required to activate. Remark: This is a magical item invented by the famous wizard, losing_mind. According to his description, this device can combine several items with magical energy to create a more valuable and powerful item. But the reality was very bad. After Mind destroyed the hundreds of items that he borrowed, this thing only spat out a pile of scrap metal. Thus, Murd was beaten up by his furious colleagues and exiled from the Adepts Association for good. And this disintegrator was labeled as trash and locked in the storage room. Chapter 376. This volume is a story that takes place between Sword Discourse in Chonglin and I Am the Writer. Why did he choose to write it now? Actually, there was no particular reason. If there was a reason, it was because there were too many things in his mind that he wanted to write, and he had put this overly shameless scenario aside. Since Fong Bujue did not use any item or skill in this scenario, it did not matter where he added this part. Then let's begin. Hee. Welcome to Thriller Paradise. A familiar voice said with a laugh. Download complete. You are currently playing single-player survival mode, Nightmare. A scenario introduction is provided in this mode, and there is a chance of triggering hidden side missions and special world building. Reward for clearing the scenario. Gain 80% extra EXP from clearing the scenario. Playing the scenario introduction soon. After that, the game will start. The screen lit up, and the main character in the cinematic was driving a car down a mountain road. The road before him was uneven, and the railings by the side of the road were obviously old. Every once in a while there would be a gap without railings. It was unclear whether it was due to an accident or not. Looking at the scenery in the distance through the windshield, he could see the mountains, deep valleys, and lush forests. This was obviously a remote area with few people around. Next to the road was a cliff, and there were many strange trees growing all over the place. Some of the branches even reached down the road, and it was a dangerous place. Just a few seconds later, Feng Bujue could guess what was going to happen next. Not long after that, the system audio began. You are a famous detective with a strange personality. One afternoon in October, you decided to go on a long journey. You drove the cheap rented car, drove across the highway, left the city, passed through the mountains, crossed the canyons, and followed the highway into the distance. In those strange and barren lands, you searched for the illusion of freedom. Until you came to this place. This is an ancient land. The footsteps of civilization seem to have refused to stay here. They left behind a few footprints before leaving. Many years ago, this place was once thought to be habitable. French Canadians have been here, Italians have been here, Poles have been here, but they have all left. The reason could be nothing more than seeing, hearing, or encountering something. It could also be imagining something. This is obviously not a place that can bring people good dreams. The narration came to an abrupt end and was replaced by the sound of brakes. As Feng Bujue expected, the car in the opening cinematic suddenly skidded, rushed out of the gap between the guardrails, and rolled down the hill. Accompanied by the rumbling sound of the rolling car, the scene in front of his eyes first trembled violently, then turned upside down, and finally, he was blinded by darkness. Thankfully, several seconds later, Feng Bujue regained the ability to move, and the scenario officially began. As soon as he opened his eyes, Brother Ju felt a little uncomfortable. At this moment, the car he was sitting in was with the chassis facing up, and his body was fastened to the driver's seat by the seatbelt. He didn't know if the car would leak oil and explode, but he definitely couldn't stay inside forever. Feng Bujue immediately tried to undo the seatbelt, and to his surprise, the seatbelt was easily undone. The quality was impressive. He used his hands to support his upside-down body and looked left and right. He realized that the windshield was completely shattered, so he decided to get out from there. Therefore, he lowered his head so that all his weight was on his shoulders. Then, he bent his body like a prawn and let his feet reach out from the front while his body followed in a backward roll. The man was quite flexible, and he was able to get out of the car in no time. After he landed on the muddy ground, Feng Bujue didn't hurry to leave the overturned car. The first thing that came to his mind was to search the car to see if there were any items that he could use. But at that moment there was a flash of light, and the exterior of the fuel tank caught fire. Seeing this, Feng Bujue turned around and ran forward without hesitation. 2 seconds later, there was an explosion, and it sent Brother Ju, who was running forward, flying several meters before he landed on his face. I really can't let my guard down in nightmare mode, Feng Bujue grumbled. This kind of near-death situation only gives me 2 seconds to react. He stood up and patted the dust off his body. Looking at the fire, he knew that there was nothing left for him to take from the car. Important reminder: you are unable to use any items brought in from outside the scenario in this scenario. Your inventory is locked. Your skill tab is locked. Before leaving the scenario, your attire will be temporarily changed to match your character's attire, and your physical fitness will be adjusted to match your physical fitness. Huh! Feng Bujue was startled when he heard the system announcement. Even though he had noticed that his attire had changed into a casual black suit, he hadn't noticed the changes to his inventory and skill tab. When he heard the announcement, he opened the game menu and saw that his items and skills had indeed been locked. Sigh. This system sure has the style of the National Development and Reform Commission. It only needs to send out a notice to do something. Feng Bujue grumbled as he accepted this setting. Then, he lifted his head out of habit and scanned his surroundings. Even though the valley was filled with tall trees, the afternoon sun still managed to shine through. He looked around and didn't see any obvious threat. Perhaps due to the system's influence, even the fire from the car that had exploded did not spread. It only burned on the body of the car, and it looked like it would be extinguished once the car was charred. Just as Feng Bujue prepared to move out to explore, the main mission notification arrived. Main mission triggered. Use the 33 chapters to complete the scenario. Under this mission, the submission for the other main mission appeared. Find and reach the Lovecraft family's mansion in the valley. Oh, is that so? Feng Bujue chuckled coldly. This is a rare special chapter, and it's indeed not a good idea to end it with just a few chapters. In that case, let me handle the 33 chapters. Normally, a super simple case that could be closed with only 5 chapters. A clumsy killer, a hidden room full of loopholes, an obvious motive, no matter what, the famous detective had to handle the 33 chapters. Crazy theories kept popping up, and the number of suspects kept increasing. Could the real killer be brought to justice? And now, this was only the first chapter. Chapter 377. Feng Bujue wandered around the wreckage for a while, but he could not figure out a way to climb up the cliff, so he had to find another route. By then, Brother Ju had lost his superhuman skills, his supernatural equipment, and even the most basic survival tool. As a normal person, it was very dangerous for him to be stuck in a jungle like this. Feng Bujue did not know if there were other cruel rules in this scenario, like the players had to eat and drink, or else they would starve to death. By the way, when Feng Bujue played this scenario, he was in sleeping mode. If there was such a setting, with his years of experience watching Man vs. Wild, Brother Ju would at most live a day or two longer than a normal person. In the end, I can only move forward blindly based on my instincts. Feng Bujue mumbled to himself as he walked through the forest. He had no choice. With his current physical ability, climbing up a tree to take a look was as difficult as climbing the sky. Even if he did manage to climb up, it was very dangerous to poke his head out from the canopy. He did not have any protective gear on him, and if he slipped, he might die. However, things progressed more smoothly than he expected. After 20 minutes of difficult trekking, Feng Bujue saw a small stream appear before his eyes. Looking up, the forest on the other side of the stream was much sparser, and there was a small path between the trees. Brother Ju walked to the stream and looked around. After confirming that there were no beasts nearby, he squatted down to wash his face and take a few sips of water. From the dryness in his throat and the obvious tiredness, his role in this scenario required him to eat, drink, and rest. However, he did not need to go to the toilet because he could not take off his pants. After rehydrating and taking a short rest, Feng Bujue resumed his journey. Even though he had not run into any more danger after the car explosion, his cautious personality and fear of nightmare mode still made Feng Bujue pay attention to every step he took. Therefore, he was still very careful as he waded through the creek, which was only knee-deep and less than 5 meters wide. When he reached the opposite shore, he used the hem of his suit to dry his feet, put on his shoes and socks, and then walked along the path. From the reflection in the water, I still look like myself. While he was moving, his mind was also thinking non-stop. All the pockets on his body are empty, and the parts that can be checked inside and out don't have any embroidery or insignia. So, what's the name of this famous detective? As he pondered, the path beneath his feet became clearer and clearer. However, the surrounding terrain became steeper and steeper. When he looked back, the forest behind him was already below his current height. Just like that, he walked for another half an hour. After passing through a pine forest, the surrounding terrain leveled out. Not long after, a road appeared in front of them. Feng Bujue took a few quick steps and came to the main road. Looking at the electric poles on the side of the road, he felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. If there were a few small advertisements on the electric poles, it would be even more intimate. In fact, he had taken a big detour and had only returned to the height of the highway from the bottom of the valley. Woo! Not long after he walked along the road, he heard the sound of a car driving in the distance. Feng Bujue looked back and saw a rather flashy red convertible sports car driving toward him. He did not waste time and stood directly in the middle of the road. He spread his legs, raised his hands, and made a pose. It was as if he was saying, "If you don't let me ride, just kill me. Hey! Help me!" As the car drove closer, Feng Bujue waved his arms and shouted. There was a middle-aged couple sitting in the car. They were both Caucasians. Whether it was their clothes or the car they were driving, they were all mid-20th century models. If someone stopped a car in such a remote place, the other party would naturally have some scruples. However, after taking a closer look, the person who stopped the car was thin and unarmed. Although his clothes were dirty, he was dressed like a decent person. Plus, he was shouting help loudly. It seemed like he was really in some kind of trouble. Therefore, the sports car slowly slowed down and stopped by the side of the road. The man in the driver's seat said to his wife, "Stay in the car, Carol." "Be careful, Dennis," his wife reminded him. Dennis opened the door and got out. He walked to Feng Bujue about 2 meters away and said, "Sir, what happened?" Feng Bujue sized up the man in front of him. He was about 1.9 meters tall and was about 40 years old. He had a burly body, brown hair, blue eyes, and a small mustache. He wore a beige short-sleeved t-shirt and a pair of white trousers. The leather shoes on his feet were shiny. A blue sweater was draped over his shoulders and the sleeves were tied in a knot in front of his chest. This way of dressing was already outdated in Feng Bujue's era, so he was even more certain that this script was set in the 20th century. Yes, sir. I was in a car accident," Feng Bujue replied. "What? Car accident?" Dennis looked at Feng Bujue. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Feng Bujue said. "It's just that my car was wrecked and rolled down the road. I walked for about an hour before I climbed up from the bottom of the valley and found this road." He tried to reveal as much information as possible to dispel the other's doubts and gain his trust. "Please forgive me for standing in the middle of the road, but I really do need someone to give me a ride." "I see." Dennis seemed to have let down his guard and took a step closer. "Don't worry, buddy. I'm happy to help." "Thank you so much," Feng Bujue said. The way he spoke then was very polite and normal. Dennis led Feng Bujue to the car and pointed at the woman in the car. "This is my wife, Carol." He then turned his face to his wife and used his hand to point at Feng Bujue. "And this is Feng Bujue." Feng Bujue said his real name to test the NPC's reaction. "This is Mr. Feng. He was in a car accident and wanted to hitch a ride." Dennis continued naturally. It looked like the system had corrected the effect of name and appearance on the NPC. "Oh, that's too bad. Are you hurt?" Carol asked. The lady sitting in the car was wearing a red woolen coat. She had blue eyes and black hair. She could not be called beautiful, and the contours of her face were slightly strange. Although she was wearing heavy makeup, the years had not been kind to this 40-year-old woman. The thick foundation could not cover all the wrinkles. "I'm fine. Thank you for your concern, madam," Feng Bujue replied as he quickly got into the back seat. Even if the other party wanted to change his mind, it was too late. It was impossible to drive this guy out of the car. "Mr. Feng." Dennis got into the driver's seat and turned around. "My wife and I are going to a villa in the mountains to attend a family gathering. We're not far from our destination. If you don't mind, come with us to the villa first. There's a phone there. We can inform your family or friends to pick you up. Thank you so much, Fong Bujue said. I haven't asked your name yet. Lovecraft, Dennis answered and started the engine. Dennis Lovecraft. Chapter 378. Dennis drove while talking to Fong Bujue in the back seat. After all, it was impossible for him to let his guard down completely since he had only met a stranger for less than 5 minutes. Therefore, this kind of communication was also a form of probing. Due to the limited information he had, Fong Bujue obviously felt powerless during the conversation. This was because he knew nothing about the year and location of the script. Also, he couldn't tell him anything about himself, such as his birthday, home address, and whether he had any relatives. Fortunately, Brother Ju was very quick-witted. Shortly after the conversation began, he said, I might have a slight concussion during the car accident. My memory seems to have been affected. With this sentence as a foundation, if he was asked a question, he could directly answer, Sorry, I can't remember. Then, he would put his hand on his forehead and pretend to be in pain. Therefore, during this short journey, Fong Bujue only revealed 3 pieces of information: name, gender, and occupation. On the other hand, Dennis and his wife got a lot of information from him. First of all, the year of the script was 1985. The location was a small European country called Aseri, which sounded fictional. Secondly, Mr. Dennis Lovecraft, who exuded a tall, rich, and handsome temperament, was a businessman who mainly dealt in industrial pipelines. And his wife, Carol, although now took her husband's surname, from the conversation between the two, it could be inferred that the woman's background was quite prominent, much higher than the man's. Just this point alone made Fong Bujue have a lot of conjectures. A handsome and tall man married a wife who was not very beautiful, but had a strong background. Generally, when this kind of setting appeared in detective novels, the probability of a murder was very high. For example, the man had a mistress outside, or he didn't have one yet, and was preparing to take the woman's property and find another one. These were very convincing motives for murder. In addition, after some observation, Fong Bujue found that the couple seemed to be a little uneasy about the future of the trip. It seemed that the so-called family gathering was not a normal meeting between relatives and friends. There must be more to it. Look, we're here. Dennis's voice pulled Fong Bujue back from his thoughts. After the car drove around a corner, a mountain villa appeared in Fong Bujue's sight. The road in front of them branched off and led to the villa's driveway. Dennis drove in and came to the front door of the villa. He didn't get out of the car, but only pressed the car horn twice. Soon, a man in a traditional black tuxedo opened the door and walked out. This person looked to be about 60 years old, and his hair was already white. However, his hairstyle was still meticulously combed, and his back was also straight. So it's young Master Dennis. Welcome back, the man said and came forward to welcome him. There was a slight delay on the way. Are you okay? Henderson, Dennis replied. Don't worry, young master, my body is still very strong. As Henderson spoke, he came to the side of the car and opened the door for the lady. Hello, Miss Carol. Thank you, Henderson. Carol got out of the car. Dennis also got out of the car and saw Henderson looking at Fong Bujue with a puzzled expression. Oh, let me introduce you, Dennis said. This is the housekeeper, Mr. Henderson. This is Mr. Fong Bujue. Hello. Nice to meet you. Fong Bujue greeted him politely. Mr. Fong met with an accident on the mountain road. He lost his car and luggage. Fortunately, he's fine. Dennis explained, if it's convenient, please ask Olivia, the maid, to prepare a guest room and a set of clean and fitting clothes for him. Yes, young master, I'll do it right away. When Henderson agreed, he had already taken out 2 large suitcases from the trunk of the car. He panted heavily and turned to go into the house. Thank you so much for your trouble, Mr. Lovecraft. Feng Bujue was still very polite on the surface, but he was thinking in his heart, two middle-aged men watching an old man carry such heavy luggage, but they didn't say anything and seemed to be used to it. Maybe this could become a potential motive for murder. Not at all. Since you're here, you're a guest, Dennis replied. This is how we treat our guests. As they were talking, a short man in a white shirt and overalls walked out. He was in his early 40s, had a beard, and his face was rosy. He looked very energetic. Young Master Dennis, housekeeper Henderson asked me to park the car in the garage for you. Okay. Dennis casually handed the car keys to the man and turned to Feng Bujue. Oh, this is Gardener Barton. He paused for a moment and continued, Please follow me into the house, Mr. Feng. Feng Bujue responded and followed Dennis and his wife into the villa. Current mission completed. Main mission updated. The system notification sounded at this moment, but Feng Bujue wasn't in a hurry to check the menu. After entering the house, he naturally observed the surrounding environment first. The foyer on the first floor was very spacious. The furniture was neatly arranged, and the wallpaper and furnishings were basically cool colors, which seemed to hint at the owner's personality. Above his head was the oak ceiling, which was extremely high. Under his feet was also a wooden floor, which was covered with a messy pattern of gold silk carpet. The windows were all made of Venetian glass, and the window frames were painted green-gray. Looking forward, 7 to 8 meters away was the staircase leading to the second floor. At this moment, a beautiful woman happened to be slowly walking down the stairs. She looked to be at most in her 30s, and she was wearing a green low-cut dress. She looked charming, and her skin was as white as snow. Her voluptuous upper body was on the verge of popping out, but her waist was painfully thin. Dennis, Carol. The beautiful woman warmly greeted Dennis and his wife. Oh, how are you? She walked over and gave the two of them a ceremonial hug. Oh, Odetta, I'm so happy to see you, replied Carol. Although she said that, and her tone was very sincere, Feng Bujue didn't see the slightest bit of happiness in her eyes. Dennis said in a neutral tone, How's father's health? Odetta's expression suddenly dimmed. I'll let Dr. Powell tell you later. She seemed to want to change the topic, so her gaze fell on Feng Bujue, and she asked, Dennis then briefly told Odetta about Feng Bujue. It was worth noting that when he introduced Odetta to Feng Bujue, he used the words, my father's third wife. Chapter 379. When Brother Ju heard what Dennis had to say, his mind raced. Combining the conversation and expressions of the three NPCs, he instantly came up with 17 or 18 hypotheses for the murder case. Let's not talk about which madam's mother you are. Judging from your age, your father should be in his 60s or 70s, but your stepmother is quite young, Feng Bujue said. That Dr. Powell is the family doctor here, right? Looks like your father's health isn't too good. I've only been in the house for 5 minutes, and I'm already faced with the foreshadowing of a murder and an inheritance fight. The housekeeper, gardener, maid, they're either potential suspects or witnesses. Young master, the guest room is ready. At this time, a burly red-haired auntie came into the hall. While she spoke to Dennis, she also nodded at the other two ladies. Mr. Feng, I think you must be exhausted. Why don't you follow Oliver to the guest room first? Dennis said. All the guest rooms here have bathrooms. You can take a shower and rest. If you think of how to contact your family or have any other requests, you can ask Henderson for help. Just treat this as your own home. He paused for a moment. Forgive me, but I still have some trivial matters to attend to, so I can't accompany you. No, I'm sorry for disturbing you, Feng Bujue quickly said. Thank you for everything you've done for me. After a few words of greeting, Feng Bujue bade farewell to the three hosts and followed the maid into the corridor on the first floor. Not long after, they came to a guest room on the west side of the villa. Auntie Oliver brought them in and went to do something else. Feng Bujue remained alert. After closing the door, the first thing he did was to search the entire guest room. After confirming that the area was safe, he let out a long sigh of relief and lay down on the soft bed. Phew! Finally, I can take a breather, he said softly. To Feng Bujue, it wasn't difficult for him to pretend to be refined, humble, and polite. It was just very tiring. All right, let's take a look at the mission first. He immediately opened the game menu to check. Find and arrive at the Lovecraft family mansion in the valley. The next mission was, stay in the mansion and wait for the case to happen. That's a good task. Feng Bujue smiled. In other words, I don't have to do anything. He rested for about half an hour. Lying on the bed, he organized the information that he already knew. Then, he sat up and looked at the clean clothes on the table. Speaking of which, how do I change my clothes? This was indeed a difficult problem. The game did not allow him to strip naked. I can only use the excuse of, because I was too tired, I fell asleep directly on the bed, so I didn't take a shower. Even Feng Bujue felt that this excuse was as far-fetched as a mild concussion. He thought for a while and muttered, I can take off the outer suit but not the trousers and shirt. How about I take off the jacket, roll up the trousers, and clean it up a little with water? Then, I'll change into this clean jacket. This method seemed more reliable than the previous one. Thinking of this, he reached out to take the clean suit, but he did not expect to trigger a system notification. Consume this item to reset your appearance. Along with the voice message, a window popped up in front of him. It said, Do you want to consume it now? Whoa. Is this the legendary one-click outfit change? Feng Bujue hesitated for a few seconds before choosing yes. Suddenly, there was a flash of white light, and he looked like a new person. Not only did his clothes change into a clean suit, but even the stains on his skin and the smell of sweat on his body disappeared. The dirty clothes he was wearing appeared on the table, neatly folded. How convenient, Feng Bujue said, then. What should I do now? Should I go and peek at the third ant taking a shower? Beep, beep, beep. The honk of a car horn interrupted his train of thought. As soon as the sound was heard, Feng Bujue walked quickly to the window, opened the curtains slightly with his hand, and looked outside following the sound. The guest room he was in just happened to have a diagonal view of the villa's main entrance. At that moment, he saw an off-road jeep drive to the front of the villa, and a man in a black leather jacket stepped out of the car. The man was about 1.8 meters tall, in his early 30s, blonde hair, a cigarette in his mouth, permed hair, and a pair of sunglasses. He had the demeanor of a biker, but he didn't ride a motorcycle. Haha. Henderson, old man, how are you? When the man saw the old butler, he came forward and gave him a bear hug. Haha. Master Jack, welcome back, Henderson greeted him with a smile. Jack was straightforward, and he didn't even pull out the car key. Instead, he carried a travel bag on the back seat of the Jeep on his shoulder and ran into the house. This guy is Dennis's brother, Feng Bujue said, looking at his age. He is definitely not Odetta's child. I don't know if he and Dennis are biological brothers or half-brothers. He left the window, sat back on the bed and thought, speaking of which, the current third wife looks no more than 35 years old. No matter how you look at it, she should be about 30 years older than the master of this family. Unless she married into the Lovecraft family 10 years ago, it is basically impossible for her to have children. Bang! Suddenly, without any warning, a rather obvious gunshot was heard, and it sounded like it came from somewhere on the second floor. They did it just like that? Very good. Feng Bujue's reaction after hearing the gunshot was also different from normal people. He first sighed, then stood up and stretched. Then, he calmly walked out of the room and walked toward the location of the gunshot. When he was in school, whenever he heard the announcement, "Student Feng Bujue, please report to the principal's office immediately," Brother Jew had this kind of reaction. It felt like, I knew something bad was about to happen, or had happened, but I would still deal with it calmly. When he walked through the corridor to the stairs, Fong Bujue happened to meet the butler, Henderson, who ran in from the main door. The old man heard the gunshot outside the house and hurried back. It seems to be on the second floor. Fong Bujue calmly raised his finger and pointed upward and said to Henderson, it came from that direction. Oh, God! Henderson exclaimed, it's the master's room, he said as he ran up the stairs. Brother Jew did not see anything that did not make sense from the man's actions. So, he quietly followed Henderson and ran to the second floor. Chapter 380. Fong Bujue followed the butler upstairs. When he passed the corner of the stairs, he found a travel bag thrown on the side of the aisle. It must have been Master Jack who threw it after hearing the gunshot. After more than a minute, Fong Bujue followed Henderson to the door of the master bedroom on the second floor. The door was open, and there was a fierce argument in the room. One of the voices was obviously Dennis. He shouted emotionally, this has nothing to do with you, Jack. Jack was not to be outdone as he replied, hey, I'm not a 3-year-old child. I have the right to know what you said to Dad to make him angry. Enough. A third voice sounded. It was a voice unfamiliar to Fong Bujue. It sounded deep and powerful. Shut up. Bang! There was another gunshot. Judging from the sound, it was from the same gun. At this time, Odetta and Carol had also heard the sound and appeared from the other end of the corridor. Oh my God! What happened? Odetta said with a worried look. Carol's expression was similar to hers. She looked uneasy. These were not the only people who were attracted by the gunshot. The maid Oliver, the gardener Barton, and another tall and thin man in his 50s with glasses that Fong Bujue had never seen before also appeared in the corridor. Everyone's expression was one of bewilderment. They were all saying things like, what's going on? Or, I heard gunshots. Master, 2 young masters. Butler Henderson was the first to step into the door. No one in the room answered his words, and the scene fell into an oppressive silence. Fong Bujue didn't care about that. He quietly approached and looked into the room over Henderson's shoulder. In the bedroom in front of him, there were a total of 3 people. In addition to Dennis and Jack, the third person was naturally the master of the Lovecraft family. In the eyes of ordinary people, Dennis's appearance was tall and heroic, but compared to his father, his temperament and aura were a lot worse. The appearance of this patriarch was unforgettable. His face was firm, his outline distinct, and his gaze was cold, indifferent, and composed. Every single move he made revealed the dignified aura of a superior, and it gave others an otherworldly, indisputable, and inviolable feeling. Well, no wonder you can marry a wife who is 30 years younger than you. You really have style. Fong Bujue, his eyes quickly wandered, observing every detail in the bedroom. At this time, the master was sitting on a sofa, wearing a crimson nightgown. In his hand was a Colt revolver with a silver wooden handle. It was a classic 6-shot model, and smoke was still coming out of the muzzle. Dennis and Jack were standing 2 meters away from him, and they didn't look like they were injured. TSK. So it's just a demonstration of shooting at the ceiling. Fong Bujue, his mentality of wanting to see the world in chaos was not desirable. So this is the purpose of adding a question mark after the title of the previous chapter. Colston. The tall and thin man in the corridor hurried over. Sorry, excuse me. He squeezed past Fong Bujue and Henderson, walked into the bedroom, and said to the master, Colston, are you crazy? Put the gun down. What if you hurt someone? Yeah. If I commit a crime in front of so many people, how can I stay in chapter 33? Fong Bujue complained in his mind. Humph. Colston put the gun on the small table next to the chair, took a deep breath, then looked up at his 2 sons and said, You 2 go out first. Dennis and Jack looked at each other, but the two of them didn't say anything. They just followed their father's order and left the room. Powell, you stay. I have something to say to you, Colston said to the tall and thin man. It seemed that he was the Dr. Powell that Odetta mentioned earlier. After the two sons left the room, Colston motioned for Powell to close the door. The atmosphere in the corridor was a bit awkward. Obviously, everyone had their own speculations about what Dennis and Colston had said earlier. Therefore, everyone's eyes were telling a special emotion. Honey, are you okay? Carol came up and held her husband's hand with concern. Don't worry, honey. Dennis was very good at hiding his true emotions. After he walked out of the door, his expression had returned to normal. Father is just angry because of some trivial things. You know, in the past few years, his temper has been getting worse and worse. I think it might have something to do with his illness. Ha! You make it sound like it's true. Jack sneered and turned to leave. Is that how you talk to your brother? Dennis said loudly. You should be glad that I don't have a gun like that. Jack's words were very frivolous. Perhaps he didn't think much of it, but the meaning behind this joke was very dangerous. In Fong Bujue's opinion, if Dennis was killed soon, this line would be enough to flag him as a key suspect. After Jack finished speaking, he went in the direction of the stairs. He was probably going back to get the luggage he had left behind. Dennis snorted and didn't call him again. As an outsider, Fong Bujue was naturally not in a position to interrupt. He just quietly observed everyone's reaction. Butler Henderson, Gardener Barton, Maid Olivia, Madame Carroll and Madame Odetta. In Brother Jew's opinion, all of them were hiding some unspeakable secret. Okay, let's disperse. There's nothing to see, it's fine. Dennis loudly asked everyone to leave. As he spoke, he noticed that Fong Bujue was also present, so he stepped forward and said, Oh, Mr. Fong, I'm so sorry, I made a fool of myself in front of you. My father used to be a soldier, and that gun is a souvenir from the war. Fong Bujue was not interested in this perfunctory explanation. He directly replied in a very open-minded tone, Oh, it's okay. I'm used to this kind of scene. I'm a detective after all. This sentence seemed to have frozen the air. Those who were leaving obviously paused. Even Jack, who had walked far away, turned back to look at Fong Bujue. The expressions on the faces of Dennis and his wife also changed slightly. Although they chatted with Fong Bujue in the car and the latter had mentioned this, Dennis and Carol didn't take it seriously at the time. A car accident survivor with a slight concussion who couldn't even tell his birthday or the year he lived in. If he said that he was an astronaut, who would believe him, however? At this moment, Fong Bujue had already tidied up and changed into a clean outfit. Looking at him from top to bottom, this person's eyes were bright, his body was fine, his speech was clear, and his words were well chosen. It seemed that he might really be a detective. Chapter 381. In the next hour, Fong Bujue returned to his room and continued to wait for the case, that he did not know when it would happen. This scenario was the easiest nightmare scenario that he had played so far. Even though his character's abilities were completely limited, other than the car explosion at the beginning, he had not encountered any obvious death flags. Plus, the NPC's attitude was relatively friendly and they all treated him with respect. As long as Brother Jew himself did not do anything stupid, such as exposing his true nature, there should not be anything that could threaten his safety. So, the difficulty is focused on the setting of Chapter 33. Fong Bujue lay on the soft and comfortable bed. He put his hands behind his head and said lazily, Normally, whether it is a mystery novel or a detective movie, the plot do not use more than a quarter. Then, before Chapter 8, something will happen no matter what. Just as he was talking nonsense, in the corridor outside the door, there was the sound of light footsteps. Fong Bujue immediately sat up alertly and leaned his ear to listen. Brother Jew had done some non-systematic but very practical research on the sound of footstep. Different height, gender, occupation, clothing, living habits, and even personality would be reflected in the sound of a person's footstep. At this time, he knew that the person was the short gardener, Barton. Knock knock. Barton gently knocked on Fong Bujue's door. Who is it? Actually, Fong Bujue had been standing behind the door for a long time, and he knew who the visitor was, but he still had to pretend to ask the question. I am the gardener, my name is Barton. Barton, who was outside the door, replied, We have met outside, do you remember? Fong Bujue opened the door and greeted the man calmly. Of course. Nice to meet you, Mr. Barton. How can I help you? Barton looked around the corridor very exaggeratedly, then lowered his voice and asked, Mr. Fong, are you really a detective? Yes. Fong Bujue's tone was very normal and revealed a convincing confidence. As he spoke, he turned sideways and said, I think you have something to say to me, please come in. Barton hesitated for a second and turned his head again. After confirming that no one was watching, he stepped through the door. Sorry to disturb you. Fong Bujue closed the door and bolted it. Then, he turned around naturally and moved a chair for Barton. Please sit down, Mr. Barton. Thank you. Barton took the chair, but he did not sit down immediately. He was waiting for his master to sit down first. Fong Bujue took in all these details. He did not say anything. He moved another chair and sat down directly. Seeing this scene, Barton also sat down. Through a few simple sentences and actions, Fong Bujue managed to create the impression that this detective was very easygoing. There is something very important that I feel the need to tell you. As soon as Barton opened his mouth, he looked very nervous. But before I tell you this, there are some things about myself that I want to confess to you first. I'm all ears, Fong Bujue said. Barton nodded, as if he had made a great decision, and said, I used to be a burglar who stole doors and picked locks. Used to be? Fong Bujue continued. Yes, of course, I'm not a burglar anymore. Barton explained, actually, when I was young, I had a bright future. Sigh. Let's not talk about it. Anyway, when I was 30, I spent 2 years in prison in Pentonville. It was really terrible there. Even in the winter, the prisoners only had a rough linen work uniform on their bodies. The food they ate was cooked with gray beetle beans, no oil, and there was endless work every day. One night, I was cold and hungry, and I was drenched in the rain. I thought I was going to freeze to death. Get to the point, Mr. Barton, Fong Bujue said. Please get to the point. Haha. I'm sorry, Barton said. In short, that experience had a great impact on me. Since then, I've turned over a new leaf. Then, is there any connection between this and the very important thing that you're going to tell me? Fong Bujue asked. I just hope that you can trust me fully, Barton replied. Fong Bujue muttered, that's strange. How will describing your criminal record help you gain my trust? Without waiting for Barton to respond, he continued, presumably, the very important thing that you're going to tell me will be very detrimental to someone in this house, right? How do you know? Barton did not finish his sentence. Fong Bujue interrupted, this is obvious. Person A speaks ill of Person B. If Person B wants to deny it, the best way is to attack Person A and reduce the credibility of his word. Do you really believe what the thief said? That's probably how it feels. He scratched his head. You know very well that others will use your disgraceful experience to talk about things. So, you might as well tell me first. Oh, sir, you're amazing. You really are a great detective, Barton said with his eyes wide open. Humph. You flatter me. Fong Bujue replied humbly, with an expression of uncontrollable pleasure. A few seconds later, he said, Please rest assured and tell me the truth, Mr. Barton. I don't have any prejudice against you. Whether it's true or not, I have my own judgment. Barton nodded, swallowed, and said, What I want to tell you is—" He lowered his voice and said with a serious expression, "Young Master Dennis might want to murder Mrs. Odetta, based on—" Fong Bujue understood that the gardener must have seen or heard something. Previously, when young Master Dennis and old Master Colston were arguing in the room, I accidentally heard a few words. Barton said. "Let me guess." Fong Bujue raised his hands, 2 fingers each, and made quotation marks. "You happened to be trimming branches and leaves on a tree outside that room, right?" Barton blinked awkwardly. Yes." "All right. Please continue. What did they say?" Fong Bujue shrugged, indicating for Barton to continue. Barton continued. "I only heard a few words. Young Master Dennis seemed to be persuading Old Master to remove Mrs. Odetta's name from the will." "Old Master refused?" Fong Bujue asked. Barton nodded. "Yes, and he was furious. He even scolded young Master." His expression darkened. At that moment, young Master Dennis said. Chapter 382. Young Master Dennis shouted excitedly to Master. "Everyone can see that the woman married you to steal our family's property. You're the only one who's still in the dark. You're old and muddle-headed, and you've been charmed by her. I won't let this happen. If you don't want to erase her name from the will, I'll find another way." Barton imitated the tone of the person involved and repeated. After young Master said this, Master roared loudly, and then there was a gunshot. At that time, I was so scared that I almost fell from the tree. Fortunately, I was close to the tree trunk, so I hugged and slid down in time. After that, I ran into the house and met everyone in the corridor on the 2nd floor. Barton looked like an honest man. He was not shrewd, but he was a little gossipy. It was human nature for the servants of wealthy families to be interested in the master's family's dirty laundry. Fong Bujue thought that Barton's description might have been exaggerated, but the basic meaning should not be too different. Therefore, Brother Ju asked tentatively, in other words, "You think this find another way is?" He made a throat-slitting gesture with his hand. "Yes." Barton's eyes widened as he nodded. "Isn't this a little arbitrary?" Fong Bujue said, "When we were in the hall earlier, I didn't think their relationship was tense to the point of death." "No. You don't know, Mr. Fong." Barton leaned forward and said, "I've been a gardener here for 8 years, so I more or less know some things." His gossipy soul seemed to have been ignited, and he narrated with a serious face, "Mrs. Odetta married Master 7 years ago. At that time, she was only 28 years old, and Master Colston was 55 years old. You should know what outsiders would think of this kind of marriage between an old man and a young woman." "Yes. A pear blossom suppressing the begonia," Fong Bujue added. "Beautiful." His face was filled with fascination. "What did you say?" Barton was confused. It seemed that the system's translation function was unable to convey Fong Bujue's meaning. "Nothing, I just thought of something irrelevant." Fong Bujue instantly changed his expression and brought the topic back. "I think, even if they don't say it on the surface, most people will still think that Mrs. Odetta married Mr. Lovecraft for money." "Yes." Barton responded and continued. "So you should be able to guess the reaction of the master's 3 children when they heard the news." "3 children?" Fong Bujue asked. "Is there another one besides Dennis and Jack?" "Yes, Master also has a daughter, Miss Nancy." Barton added, "Young Master Dennis and young Master Jack are both the children of the first wife, and Miss Nancy is the child of the master and the second wife." "Is Miss Nancy in this villa now?" Fong Bujue asked. "No, but she should be here today," Barton replied. "In fact, only Master and Madam are here. Young Master and Madam live in the city, Miss Nancy works in Vienna, and young Master seems to be homeless. But every year at this time, they come back and stay until Thanksgiving." Feng Bujue quickly sorted out the situation of the family in his mind and said, "Understood. Please continue." Okay. Barton continued. When Master announced that he was going to marry the young Miss Odetta, the family naturally thought that this woman came for Master's property. Of course, at that time, young Master Jack was busy being a rock star, and Miss Nancy was still in college. Although they were quite critical of this matter, it wasn't to the point where they couldn't accept it. But Dennis's attitude is more intense. Feng Bujue followed Barton's words. "That's right," Barton said. "I'm about the same age as young Master Dennis. In fact, I quite understand him. If I had a rich father and wanted to marry a stepmother who was 5 or 6 years younger than me, I would also object." In short, the conflict between the two was foreshadowed from then on, right? Feng Bujue said. "Yes, so over the years, the relationship between young Master Dennis and Mrs. Odetta has been very tense, but on the surface, they are very polite," Barton replied. "Oh," Feng Bujue muttered. "I heard that now. The focus of the problem seems to be Master Colston's will. Do you know anything about that?" Barton heard this, recalled for a few seconds and said, "Well, that was the winter 3 years ago. One afternoon, Master suddenly had a stroke in the study. Although he was finally out of danger, he had to be accompanied by crutches in the days that followed. This was undoubtedly a heavy blow to Master, who had always been healthy. After that, his physical condition became worse and worse. A few months later, he found a lawyer and made a will." Feng Bujue interrupted. "Could it be that Madame asked him to make it?" "I don't know about that," Barton said, "but young Master Dennis seems to think so, and he has argued with Master many times over the will. I remember that one time they quarreled very fiercely, and everyone in the house heard young Master shouting in the house, 'That woman is a witch! She should be tied to the stake and burned to death.'" "Well," Feng Bujue thought for a moment and said, "Then, why are you telling me these things?" "Because I really don't know who to ask for help, Mr. Feng," Barton said with a sad face. Barton said with a worried look on his face, "Master's shooting today really scared me. What Master Dennis said is also true. I think something bad will happen if this goes on. Master and Madam have always been good to me, and I don't want to see either of them get into trouble or do something that will harm someone's life." He paused for a moment. "I saw you in the corridor before. You were extremely calm in the face of unexpected situations. I can see from your eyes that you are a great person. That's why I'm telling you this. I think maybe you can talk to Master or young Master and persuade them not to do anything stupid." When Feng Bujue heard this, his expression didn't change. He was silent for a while before he said, "In the end, I'm just a passerby who encountered a car accident in the mountains. I'm not qualified to tell them what to do about the Lovecraft family." Barton lowered his head and showed a disappointed expression. Feng Bujue continued, "In my opinion, you are a little oversensitive, Mr. Barton. Everyone will say a few words in anger, especially when they lose control of their emotions." He spread his hand. "Witches, burning at the stake, they are obviously metaphors. When you said, 'think of another way,' perhaps you were referring to using legal means or something." He stood up and patted Barton on the shoulder. "Don't worry, Mr. Barton, nothing will happen." A woman's scream suddenly sounded, interrupting Feng Bujue's words. The system's voice followed immediately. "A current mission completed. Main mission updated." In the menu, a "Stay in the villa and wait for the case to happen" had been ticked, and a new mission appeared. "Investigate the crime scene and wait for the police to arrive." Chapter 383. This shouldn't be a smokescreen by the author, Feng Bujue said. The mission has been updated, and from the words "investigate the crime scene" and "wait for the police," this is definitely a murder case. Mr. Feng. Barton looked at Feng Bujue helplessly. "Did you hear that?" Feng Bujue replied. Anyway, let's go take a look first. He quickly walked to the door and waved for Barton to follow him. The two ran through the corridor and headed in the direction of the scream. This time, the scream came from the first floor on the east side of the villa. It happened to be a room that was symmetrical to Brother Ju's room. Feng Bujue and Barton were the first to arrive at the scene after hearing the scream. After turning a corner in the corridor, they saw Mrs. Carroll, whose face was ashen. The woman was sitting on the ground in the corridor, murmuring, "Oh, God, no. This can't be real." Her eyes were fixed on the open door in front of her. "Ma'am, what happened? Are you okay?" Barton asked. Feng Bujue did not seem to care about Mrs. Carroll's condition. He only glanced at her briefly, then strode to the guest room and turned to look at the door. Standing at the door, they could see a man's body slumped on the sofa. His head was tilted to one side, his eyes were rolled back, and his mouth was half open. His neck, collar, and shirt were all soaked in blood. Following the sound of footsteps, a few more people arrived. The one at the front was Jack. As he walked, he asked, "What's going on?" Following closely behind were Dr. Powell, Butler Henderson, and Mrs. Odetta. They all appeared in the corridor with doubtful and worried expressions. Without saying a word, Feng Bujue rushed into the room before the onlookers could get close. He checked under the bed, the closet, and the bathroom to see if anyone was hiding there. Then, he took a closer look at the victim's wounds. After confirming that Dennis was dead, Brother Ju quickly retreated to the door and bumped into Jack. "Oh, God! Dennis!" Jack was shocked when he saw the body. After 2 seconds, he wanted to run through the door. But a strong arm stopped him and blocked him out of the door. "What are you doing? Let me in!" Jack shouted agitatedly. "He's already dead," Feng Bujue said. "You can't do anything even if you go in." He said it calmly and firmly. "If you don't want to leave any evidence against yourself at the scene of the murder, it's best not to step through this door." At this time, Henderson also came to the door. As soon as he peeked his head out and saw the body, his face convulsed. He immediately clutched his chest in pain and fell down. Jack was next to him and instinctively supported Henderson. "Hey, Henderson, are you okay?" Dr. Powell, who was not far away, hurried forward. "He has a heart condition. Quick, let him lie down first." He looked up at Barton. "Mr. Barton, I have a first aid kit in my room, please." "Oh, I'll go now." Barton did not wait for the doctor to finish his sentence and understood what he meant. He turned around and ran back. When he turned the corner, he brushed past the maid, Oliver. "What happened, Mr. Barton?" "Mr. Barton," said Oliver. But Barton did not have time to pay attention to her, and rushed over anxiously. Feng Bujue, who was standing at the door, coldly observed everyone's actions. At that moment, he spoke again. "Miss Oliver." What, sir?" Oliver, who was far away at the end of the corridor, asked blankly. "Please call the police," Feng Bujue said calmly. "There's been a murder here." Oliver's reaction was of course very shocked, but Feng Bujue's tone did not sound like he was joking at all. Combined with the situation of the people in the corridor, Oliver screamed in hindsight, "Oh, that's too scary." Feng Bujue did not have time to calm everyone down. He just did what he had to do. He turned his head to the other side and said to Mrs. Odetta, who was dumbstruck, "Madam, can I trouble you to go to the second floor and tell your husband what happened here?" "Hey, buddy." Jack, who was kneeling on the ground to help the doctor save Henderson, suddenly looked up. "Who are you? Since when are you the one calling the shots here?" "I'm just an outsider who is relatively calm." Feng Bujue's gaze quickly swept across everyone's faces. "I believe all of you should know that if there are victims, there are murderers." As soon as these words came out, everyone's expression suddenly changed. "So, before the police arrive, I hope all of you can cooperate with me to protect the scene," Feng Bujue said as he walked out of the room. He was about to close the door when he found that there was a key in the door lock facing the corridor. Mrs. Carroll, Fong Bujue immediately asked, when you open the door, is the door locked? After a few minutes, with more people around, Carol's mood stabilized a little, but then she began to sob, unable to answer Fong Bujue's question. Please answer me, this is very important. Fong Bujue asked. Yes, yes. Carol squeezed out a sentence reluctantly. What's wrong? Jack asked Brother Ju. What does that mean? Fong Bujue raised his finger and pointed at the window opposite the guest room. That's the only window in the bedroom, and it's closed at the moment. The window handle is also in a downward state. He paused for a second, then continued, the layout of this room is the same as the guest room I'm in. There's also a frosted glass window in the bathroom, but it's very small, no more than 10 inches long. It's impossible for anyone to pass through. Jack seemed to have realized something, and his expression changed abruptly. You mean, the murderer is still in the room? How is that possible? Fong Bujue denied. Who would close the windows and doors and stay at the scene after committing a crime? Besides, I've already checked just now, and there's no one else in the room. He touched his chin and said, looks like this is a locked room murder. While they were talking, Barton had already rushed back with the medicine box. Quick, give me the medicine box. Dr. Powell took the medicine box, skillfully found the medicine he needed, and gave old Henderson a shot. Then, he used the stethoscope to listen for a moment. Then, he let out a long sigh and said, Phew, he should be fine now. I think he's just in shock. He'll be fine after half a day's rest. Powell wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, Jack, help me carry him back to the room, will you? Okay. Jack answered as he glared at Fong Bujue. He said coldly, Anyway, there's a great detective here. I don't need to get involved. Chapter 384. The police came faster than expected, arriving in 20 minutes. During these 20 minutes, Barton helped Mrs. Carroll up and sent her to the living room to rest. Henderson was carried back to his room. As he hadn't fully regained consciousness, he was temporarily taken care of by Aunt Oliver. After Jack and Powell carried Henderson away, they quickly returned to the crime scene. However, Brother Ju still guarded the door tightly, not allowing anyone to enter, including himself. Even old Master Colston, who rushed over after hearing the news, couldn't get past Fong Bujue. This family head was indeed extraordinary. Although he was very emotional when he arrived, when Fong Bujue told him the reason for stopping everyone from entering the crime scene, Colston quickly calmed down and even confirmed Brother Ju's actions. As a police car with sirens blaring stopped in front of the villa, the system notification rang in Fong Bujue's ears. His mission was updated. Assist the police in the investigation. Barton answered the door and led the few police officers to the door of the crime scene. At this time, there were 5 people waiting in the corridor. In addition to Fong Bujue, there were old Master Colston, Mrs. Odetta, young Master Jack, and Dr. Powell. 3 police officers followed behind Barton. The leading agent was dressed in a casual suit with a round hat and shiny leather shoes. He looked to be in his 50s. He was slightly plump and had a very distinctive beard. He gave off a shrewd and capable feeling. The other 2 police officers were younger. One of them had a baby face and looked like a child who had just graduated from school. Both of them were wearing uniforms. Looking at the style, it was very similar to the black British police uniforms from the 1980s, but there were some differences in the details. After all, this was a fictional country, so the difference was understandable. I'm Inspector Schofield. The plain-clothed agent walked in front of everyone and said, May I ask which one of you is Mr. Lovecraft? Colston took a few steps forward with his crutch and said, I'm Colston Lovecraft, the owner of the villa. He paused. The father of the deceased, Schofield's sharp gaze met Colston's for a few seconds, not hiding his suspicion. A detective like him had long developed an occupational disease. Compared with looking for evidence, he was better at dealing with people and finding a breakthrough in an interrogation. Then, where is the body? Schofield asked. It's in that room. Colston pointed at the door beside Fong Bujue. Well, sorry, excuse me. Schofield looked at the two men behind him and signaled them to follow. When the three of them reached the door, Fong Bujue stepped aside. When Schofield passed by Brother Ju, he looked him up and down but didn't pay much attention to him. Instead, he turned his attention to the door. Schofield hesitated when he saw the key in the lock. He tried to turn the doorknob and found that the door was unlocked. 2 seconds later, he saw the body on the sofa behind the open door. Did anyone move the body? Schofield did not enter the room immediately but turned around to ask. No, Jack answered. Jack added, after Caroline found the body, the house has remained the same. You are? Schofield asked. My name is Jack, Jack replied. He gestured in the direction of the body with his chin. The man sitting there is my brother Dennis. He paused and added, Carol is Dennis' wife. She's in the living room now. Schofield stared at Jack for a few seconds and looked back at the room. Were you the one who told everyone not to go in? No, it's him. Jack pointed at Fong Bujue. Schofield turned around, but before he could speak, Brother Ju said, Hello, officer. I'm Fong Bujue. Fong. When Schofield heard the name, his expression changed. He widened his eyes and looked Fong Bujue up and down again. What? You said your name is Fong Bujue? From the tone of the officer's question, Brother Ju felt like this officer had heard of his name before. He thought about the setting in the introduction and answered tentatively, Yes, Fong Bujue. I'm a detective. Is that really you? Schofield suddenly raised his voice. He glanced at Brother Ju's face several times. After confirming something, he said, No wonder I thought you looked familiar. Now that I think about it, I've seen you on the newspaper before. You're that famous detective, Fong Bujue. So that's how it is. No matter what name I give to the NPC, the system will assume that I'm playing the role of that name, right? Fong Bujue said. Speaking of which, I'm really a famous detective. Even the police in this place have heard of my name, which means that I'm quite famous. I'm basically on par with Hercule Poirot, Agatha Christie's Belgian detective. Unlike a certain paranoid narcissist who lived in London and hid his fame, Poirot was, by definition, a very famous detective whose cases had been reported in the press, and whose name was well known to the public. It is worth mentioning that in Hercule's exploits, the author vaguely hinted that in 1864, the Holmes family visited the Poirot family during their second trip to Europe. This should also be Christie's tribute to Conan Doyle. Everyone loves to be paranoid. That's it. Ah, yes, that's me. Fong Bujue maintained a calm and unfathomable expression on his face as he answered coldly. I was wondering why the general public knew how to protect the crime scene, Schofield said. So it's because you're here. At this time, the Lovecraft family members had very complicated expressions on their faces. This expression had two meanings. First, they were surprised. They didn't expect that the guy in front of them was really a famous detective. Secondly, it was a guilty conscience. Because people with secrets didn't want to deal with people who specialized in revealing secret. Oh, that's great. Schofield continued. Please give us some guidance. With you here, I think the case will be solved soon. Ha, ha, ha. I'll try my best. Fong Bujue laughed dryly, but in his heart, he was thinking, although I'm quite confident in my reasoning ability, is it really good to solve the case quickly? This is only the 9th chapter. If the case is solved in 5 chapters, the remaining 20 chapters will be a mess for the readers to read. Speaking of which, your name is as long as 5 words. Coupled with the frequent appearance of a 6-word surname like Lovecraft, as well as the large annotation above, It's all a despicable means to secretly lengthen the word count. The effect of this method of breaking the bottom line is actually negligible. Sure enough, if I want to make it to the 33rd chapter, I still have to rely on my strength. Chapter 385. The police began their investigation. Of course, it could also be said that it was Fong Bujue's investigation work. After chatting with Schofield for a while, Brother Bujue learned that there were only 4 police officers who came to the mountain villa to investigate the murder case. Besides Schofield and the 2 men he brought into the house, there was one left outside the house to watch the car. However, this was reasonable. For a police station in such a remote area, resources were very limited. Sending 2 police cars and 4 police officers to the house already showed that they valued this case very much. It's a little late, Detective. Do you want to let your men take the body back to town for an examination? When Fong Bujue asked this question, he was kneeling on the floor next to the body. He put his head close to Dennis's neck and carefully observed the wound. At this time, the people in the corridor outside the door had already left. One police officer was standing guard at the door, while another police officer began to take some preliminary statements. There's only one clinic in town. I don't think the doctor there can handle this kind of work, Schofield replied. Our town rarely has a murder case like this. If we want to do an autopsy, I'm afraid the body will have to be sent to Ogilvy City, which is half a day's journey from here. The police station there is equipped with a forensic doctor. Okay, Fong Bujue interrupted. Pretend I didn't ask. As he spoke, he stood up and walked to the back of the sofa. He held Dennis's head and moved it gently. After a few seconds he said, he was strangled to death. The wound is very thin, and it's at the back of his neck. The murder weapon should be steel wire or fishing line. Schofield followed Fong Bujue and also saw the situation at the back of Dennis's neck. Fong Bujue continued, in addition to the wound caused by the wire, there are many small irregular wounds on the front of the neck. He raised the dead man's hand and used a toothpick to pick out a piece of flesh between the fingernails. He said, obviously, he used his fingers to pick it out. Schofield thought for a while and said, This was left when he was strangled from behind and tried to pull the wire away? A futile struggle. Fong Bujue said coldly, as long as the murderer tightened the rope tightly enough, even if a hemp rope was used as a murder weapon, it would still be difficult for the victim to dig their fingers into the space between the hemp rope and the skin, let alone such a thin thread. If the murderer's arm was strong enough, it was possible to cut off the entire head. Listening to Brother Ju's calm narration and looking at his cold and focused expression, even Schofield, a detective who had seen many big scenes, couldn't help but shiver. The carpet in front of the sofa has traces of the deceased using the tip of her foot. It's obvious that there are a few layers of folds on the carpet. Fong Bujue looked down. Combined with the scuff marks on the carpet, my preliminary judgment is that he was strangled to death while sitting on this chair. After he died, the murderer didn't move him. Speaking of this, Fong Bujue suddenly saw something. He bent down, slightly pushed the dead man's legs aside, and picked up a cigarette butt from the cushion of the sofa. The next second, he immediately turned his head to look at the ashtray on the small table next to him. There were also a few cigarette butts in it. Brother Ju compared the two in front of him and even sniffed them. After confirming that they were the same brand, he said, he was smoking when he was killed. So, the murderer hid somewhere in this room in advance, sneaked up on the victim from behind and then suddenly killed him? Schofield speculated. Fong Bujue shook his head and replied, in this room, the only places to hide are under the bed, the closet and the bathroom next door. He went to the bathroom and gave the door a gentle push. The hinges of the wooden door creaked. Most of the wooden doors and furniture make that noise. If the murderer was hiding in the bathroom or the closet, he would definitely make a sound when he came out. He came to the bedside again. As for under the bed, it's very difficult to hide an adult. Also, the victim's face was facing the bed, so he would have been seen when he came out. Then, it means that before the victim was killed, he knew that the murderer was in the same room as him, Schofield said after thinking for a few seconds. But he wasn't prepared. Fong Bujua shrugged and said, "Yes, the murderer must be someone who knew Dennis." So when the murderer walked to Dennis' blind spot and took out the murder weapon, Dennis was still smoking leisurely. As expected, the murderer is in this villa. Schofield muttered thoughtfully. What? It sounds like you already have a suspect? Fong Bujua asked. It's just some immature ideas, Schofield said. Why don't you say it, detective? Fong Bujua said. Schofield hesitated for a moment and glanced in the direction of the door, which was still open, before he lowered his voice slightly and said, I suspect it's Master Colston. Why do you think so? Fong Bujua asked. Don't you think that old man seems too calm? Schofield said. His speech and behavior don't seem like the reaction of an old man who has just suffered the pain of losing his son. No, his reaction is normal. Before you came, when he just learned that his son was killed, he was indeed very agitated, but he calmed down faster than the average person, Fong Bujua said. Because he's not an ordinary old man. He paused for a moment. There are at least 4 obvious signs on Colston that he has a military background. Dennis also mentioned this to me. Colston may have seen more corpses than you and I have seen living people. His will is strong and he's rational enough. This kind of person won't break down easily. As Fong Bujua spoke, he walked to the window. In addition, as you can see, Master Colston needs the help of crutches to walk, and the murderer of this case has to hold the murder weapon with both hands and approach the victim. As he spoke, his eyes lit up as if he had found something at the edge of the window frame, but he didn't stop talking. Besides, if he was in the same room with his father, Dennis wouldn't have his back to him and talk while smoking. That would be too disrespectful. Did you find something? Schofield also noticed Fong Bujua's actions and quickly followed to check. I just figured out how the murderer escaped from the secret room, Fong Bujua replied in a relaxed tone. That's not a problem. He pointed to the window frame. Look here. Schofield followed the direction that Brother Ju was pointing at and noticed a faded blood stain that had a neat edge. What does that mean? It means that the murderer directly used the murder weapon to create this secret room. After Fong Bujua said that, he opened the window and poked his head out to look. The foundation of this mansion is quite thick. The height of the window is about 1.7 meters from the grass outside. He climbed out. After all, this was only the first floor. Other than Colston and Oliver, everyone else is a suspect. Then, he lowered his head to inspect the footprint. Wait a minute, Fong Bujua mumbled to himself as he jumped onto the grass outside the house. Chapter 386. Unfortunately, there were no obvious clues on the lawn outside the villa, because the lawn here was made of pseudothecium. This kind of plant grew the most in summer and autumn, with well-developed stolons and strong regenerative abilities. On such a lawn, unless one could trample on it, the footprints would not stay for long. Fong Bujua looked up at the window and the outer wall of the villa. There were no traces left there either. However, he was not disappointed at all because he was not in a hurry to find out the truth. Since it's not dark yet, I want to investigate the outside of the villa. Do you want to come with me? Fong Bujua said to Schofield, who was inside the window. Oh, okay. Schofield naturally would not give up the opportunity to ask the famous detective for advice. He replied, Please wait a moment. Before he finished, he turned around and left the window. He ran to the door of the room and said a few words to the police officer who was standing guard. Then, he turned back to the window, mimicked Fong Bujua, and jumped out from the window. The detective was quite meticulous. He was very careful when he moved, fearing that he would touch the blood on the windowsill and destroy the evidence. After they were outside the house, Schofield followed Fong Bujue and started to patrol the villa. "Mr. Fong, you just said, locked room? What does that mean?" Schofield asked. "Have you read Poe's Murder in the Rue Morgue?" Fong Bujue asked. No," Schofield said. "I rarely read novels." "Okay. Locked room murder is one of the so-called impossible crimes." Fong Bujue did not want to waste time on the topic of literature. He said directly, "When you entered the house, did you notice the key in the door?" "Yes," Schofield replied. "There are two ways to lock this kind of door. The first is, when the door is closed, the person inside the door will turn the copper hat-shaped latch on the back of the lock counterclockwise. The second is, when the door is closed, the person outside the door will use the key to turn the latch twice." Fong Bujue explained. Mrs. Carroll, who found the body, used the key to open the door because the door was locked and no one answered. Schofield thought for a moment and continued, "In other words, when the body was found, the doors and windows of the house were all bolted from the inside. Inside the enclosed space, there was only one victim and no one else, but the state of the victim's death shows that it was not a suicide," Fong Bujue said. "In this kind of case, the method used by the killer constitutes a murder in a locked room." "Oh." He paused for a moment before asking, "Wait a minute, based on this case, what if the killer also has the key?" "Before you came, I asked everyone in the corridor a few questions. Of course, I also asked about this." Fong Bujue replied, "In this house, each room has two keys, one for regular use and one for spare. The spare keys are all strung together and kept by the butler, Mr. Henderson. I've already seen the chain. The iron ring is made of iron, and the key on it cannot be removed alone. It's like a dungeon key from the Middle Ages. As Henderson suddenly fell ill and fainted, the spare key is temporarily held by old Master Colston. And the regular key is a separate one." As he spoke, he took out a key from his pocket. "This is the regular key to the guest room that I live in. I found it in the drawer of a table in the room." He paused and continued. "The rooms that are usually empty are cleaned regularly by the maids, so they are usually not locked, and the key is placed inside the room." As Fong Bujue spoke, they had reached the back of the house. After he turned a corner, he continued, "Since the regular key to the guest room is with Miss Carroll, then there are three scenarios for the murderer to have the key. 1. The murderer is the butler, Henderson. 2. The murderer stole the spare key from the butler and returned it to the original owner after killing him and locking the door. 3. The murderer managed to duplicate a regular key." You've determined that this room is a locked room. In other words, you don't think any of these three scenarios are possible? "Yes," Fong Bujue replied. "First, in the first scenario, Butler Henderson is the murderer." He started to explain one by one. "The possibility of that is close to zero, because when the old man saw the body, he was so scared that he had a heart attack and almost died. At the time, I was very close to him, and there was a doctor beside me. If that was a pretense, then Mr. Henderson would have won an Oscar, and Dr. Powell would have been his accomplice. Of course, there is another more extreme hypothesis, schizophrenia. For example, the murderer is the other personality of Butler Henderson, and the main personality knows nothing about it." I see." Schofield nodded. "The possibility of the second scenario is also very low." Fong Bujue continued, "Because this method is very risky and difficult. It's fine if the murderer is discovered when he stole the key, but if the murderer is discovered when he returned the key, then the murder will be exposed as well. Furthermore, during the period when the murderer stole the key and secretly returned it, Butler Henderson could have discovered that the spare key was missing at any time. This is coincidentally the time when the murderer committed the murder. If Henderson reported this to the police after the murder, then the setup of the hidden room would have been pointless. Without waiting for Schofield to respond, Brother Jew continued. The possibility of the third scenario is higher, but... He suddenly stopped in front of a tree and looked up for a while before continuing. But Dennis and his wife come to the bungalow a limited number of times each year, and every time they come, the guest room they stay in is not fixed. Because Mrs. Carroll is very picky, at different seasons, she will choose different rooms facing different directions. It was impossible for the murderer to predict which room they would stay in this time, so, if it was the third situation, it meant that, except for those rooms that were occupied all year round, the murderer had stolen the keys to all the other rooms and made a backup of them. And his or her goal is to one day, after killing Dennis, disguise the room as a hidden room. That is indeed a little inconceivable, Schofield added. Technically speaking, it is possible, and the risk is not too high. Fong Bujua said, but the possibility of it actually happening is very low, and the motive is still a mystery for the time being. He walked around the big tree in front of him a few times, glanced at the second-floor window of the villa, and then continued to walk forward. To sum up, let's rule out the possibility that the murderer has the key, and then consider, what other methods can we use to complete this secret chamber? Brother Jew's tone was like a teacher asking a student, but the 50-year-old detective in front of him didn't care at all. He asked reverently, "It must have something to do with the bloodstain on the windowsill, right?" Actually, the method is very simple. It can be done with a relatively strong wire. As long as we experiment once or twice, we can do this in all the rooms with windows in this bungalow. Fong Bujua raised his hand and gestured in the direction of the bungalow. "I've finished looking outside. Let's go inside and I'll show you." Chapter 387. More than 10 minutes later, Fong Bujua led Schofield and the police officer who had been guarding outside the villa to his guest room. He was ready to demonstrate the layout of the secret room. This room was basically a mirror image of the crime scene. In addition to the complete symmetry of the layout, the structure and material of the door and window were the same. It was perfect for a reenactment of the case. Schofield was naturally full of anticipation. He wanted to see with his own eyes how the famous detective would solve the puzzle in front of him. Fong Bujua had just obtained the consent of the owner of the house and went to the utility room to get an object similar to the murder weapon, a broken string. He took it out and walked to the middle of the room. He turned back and said to the two police officers, "Since we have sufficient conditions and won't destroy the real crime scene, why don't we reenact the crime scene first?" "That means," Schofield replied, "the three of us will reenact the crime scene?" "Two will do," Fong Bujua said. "I'll play the murderer." He looked at the police officer next to Schofield. "This is Deputy, sir." Officer Deputy raised the brim of his hat with his hand and introduced himself. He was a rather tall young police officer. He had the same mustache as Dennis, but his appearance and temperament were much more approachable. "Officer Deputy, your body shape is closer to the victim's. You will play the victim," Fong Bujua said. Deputy exchanged glances with his superior next to him. After getting permission, he took half a step forward and replied, "It's my pleasure, sir." "Then let's begin." Fong Bujua reached out and gestured in the direction of the chair. He said to Deputy, "Please sit on that sofa chair." Deputy strode over and bent down to sit down. "Please try to sit as naturally as possible," Fong Bujua said. Deputy replied, "Okay," he said and leaned back in the chair. "Before Dennis was killed, he was sitting on the sofa and smoking like this," Fong Bujua began to explain. "And the murderer was in the same room as him." He took a few steps and came to the side behind Deputy. "This side of the room is all in Dennis' blind spot. There is a closet, a table, a cabinet, and the door to the bathroom here. When Dennis is not on guard, the murderer has many ways to quietly walk into this area." Fong Bujua gave an example. First, the murderer talked to Dennis and paced back and forth, slowly walking behind him. Second, the murderer claimed that he needed to go to the bathroom. Third, the murderer pretended to take something out of the closet. He walked as he spoke, quietly walking behind Schofield. "Look, this is very easy." "Ah. When did you?" Schofield was stunned. He was still thinking about what Fong Bujue had said, but when he heard this, he realized that the detective had already demonstrated the first example. Fong Bujue shrugged and walked back to the sofa. When a person is not on guard and is relaxed, it is very easy to be ambushed. It can be said that most people in this world are in a state where they are not on guard most of the time. He gave another example. For example, you are sitting in a restaurant that you frequent and suddenly, a waiter or a customer walks past you in a hurry. At this time, would your brain remind you, "Be careful, this guy might take out a knife from his sleeve and turn around to stab you in the head"? Or, you are sitting in a warm and comfortable home, and after taking a shower, you are reading a serialized novel. At this time, would you consider that there is someone aiming a sniper rifle at you outside the window next to you? When Schofield and Demuty heard this, they instinctively looked at the window in the room. Fong Bujue raised his right hand and gently tapped his temple with his index finger. Our brain can't take on the task of being on guard for a long time. So, as long as we think that the environment we are in is safe, we will let down our unnecessary guard. He paused for a moment. Let's look at the case in front of us. When Dennis was killed, he was in the guest room of his father's mountain villa, and he was in the same room with someone he knew. In his mind, of course, he wouldn't be on guard that the other party might suddenly take out a steel wire and strangle him to death, but he would never have thought that. At this point, Fong Bujue picked up the strings and walked toward Deng Puti. Although Demuty knew that this was just a reenactment of the murder, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Brother Ju's strange remarks and cold-blooded tone made the police officer feel a chill down his spine. The victim's figure was very similar to yours, and the back of his neck was just right for him to lean against the back of the sofa. For the murderer, this was an ideal height for him to exert his strength. As Fong Bujue spoke, he patted Demuty's shoulder. "Please experience the feeling of being strangled from behind." Before Demuty could respond, Fong Bujue put the strings in front of his chin. "Let's assume that your neck is strangled by me at this moment, and there is a strong sense of congestion and suffocation above your neck that is taking away your life. Then, in the 1 minute before you die, how would you react in panic and pain?" "I would try to untie the restraint on my neck, and at the same time," Demuty thought for a while and said, "I would try my best to push my body backward." Schofield heard this and looked at Brother Ju. The marks on the carpet at the scene and the scratches on the victim's neck are all evidence of these reactions. "What else?" Fong Bujue motioned for Demuty to continue. Demuty experienced it again and suddenly thought of something. He said in surprise, "I think I would try to grab the murderer's arm or body." That's right." Fong Bujue nodded and said, "It's just that. Sitting on a sofa with a solid base and a heavy weight, and the carpet under his feet is difficult to stand on. In this state, if the victim's neck was strangled with a steel wire from behind, even if the victim tried his best to stretch his hand backward, it would be difficult for him to reach the murderer's body." "Forearm," Schofield said, as if he suddenly realized something. During the victim's struggle, he would likely leave scratches on the murderer's hands, wrists, and even forearms. Fong Bujue added, "Not only that." He paused. "Generally speaking, to strangle a 200-pound man, the murderer must be fast and powerful. However, the murderer in this case used a steel wire, which is the best tool for strangling. Not only is it easy to hide, but it also doesn't require much strength from the murderer. Even a woman or a minor can use this thing to kill a strong man. Professional killers often use this method to kill." As Brother Ju spoke, He slowly raised his hands with his palms facing forward. However, you have to be careful when using this thing. If you don't take protective measures, your palms can easily be injured. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.